Well,
Yeah, we put that in there.
trying to be out of all the things that were.
Alderman Tindem.
Here.
Alderman Grover.
Here.
Alderman Rainey.
Here.
Alderman Burris. Alderman Fisk.
Here.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Here.
Alderman Nguyen.
Here.
9-0.
We have a quorum. Welcome to the Monday, June 18th, 2012 meeting of the Evanston City Council. First item on the agenda is the mayor's public announcements and proclamations. I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that Bookman's Alley, which has been a beloved part of the city of Evanston for 33 years, is closing, and we have all had marvelous times there, and it's part of what makes Evanston a special place to live. But the good news is that Mr. Carlson is here tonight and that we have a chance to honor him. And I have a certificate which I'm going to read. The City of Evanston hereby awards this certificate of appreciation to Roger Carlson, owner of Bookman's Alley. The service to residents, students, educators, travelers, and book lovers throughout the state transported guests into another world full of literary treasures and artifacts of history. His gem of a store contained a collection of literary works spanning over 100 years. After more than 33 years, a treasured part of the Evanston community will close its doors and will be sorely missed. Mr. Carlson, would you come forward? Anything? Oops. Rodney, can you help us out? There we go.
Well, I want to thank everyone for the kind reception. I would...
Face that way, you'll be on TV.
Okay.
I'm getting good. There we go.
The pedestrian safety piece that was handed out reminds me about my one thing that I've learned. Look both ways before crossing a one-way street.
Thank you. I think that's one of the best speeches ever given.
Hold it up, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did just specifically want to say thank you to Mr. Carlson before you head out. I did just want to specifically say a special thank you to you. Over the years, your store has been a destination for dates. Many years ago, I take my children there. The oldest is 14, the youngest is 8. They've all had great adventures. I've personally enjoyed it greatly. Whether I'm stopping in the store or picking it up in a literary reference, it shows up in the Time Traveler's Life and probably other places as well. The mayor said it best when she referred to it as a treasure. It's been a great treasure, and it's been very special to me, and I appreciate everything you've put into the store. Thank you.
City Manager, do you have presentations and announcements?
Yes, I do. Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. We're going to hold our recognition of our latest Tree City USA Award to a future meeting. The CTA work and construction projects update, as many of you are aware, we are moving forward quickly to the second of our 2 weekends dealing with the viaduct construction. This will be on this Saturday and Sunday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the same schedule that we had 2 weekends ago. We believe everything is in place. I think one of the complicating matters this weekend is the Fountain Square Art Festival. However, we've worked very closely with them. Kudos to Suzette Robinson and our Public Works Department for helping to sort through the traffic issues that will likely be caused. Our plan is to have another webcam this time in the Rotary Building from sort of a sky view of the road, the change out of the viaducts. So that's all coming up. You can still go to our website at cityofevanston.org for more details. Matt Swinkowski, our Intergovernmental Relations Coordinator, has been working closely with the Chicago Transit Authority on the viaduct project. And Matt, I don't know if there's anything. I've been vamping here while you walked Mr. Carlson out. Any other specific issues you'd like to raise? I've already kind of talked about the general terms. Are there any other specific things people need to be aware of?
Madam Mayor, City Council, Clerk Green, City Manager Bobkowitz. Real quickly, just a general timeline. The most important parts is when the streets will be closing, 7 a.m. Friday. That includes just the area immediately around Dempster and then as well around Grove. Traffic in and out of the Rotary Building will be allowed throughout about the mid-afternoon, and then people exiting the building. And then the viaducts on Saturday will be going in at 2 o'clock at Dempster Street between 2 and 4, and then again at about 6 p.m. on Saturday for Grove Street. And then the streets will open back up Grove on Monday morning to allow Rotary traffic in. And then Dempster will not open up until Tuesday. And that is to allow for some more of the side work to be done as opposed to stretching it out another 4 or 5 days. So,
Matt, could you tell us where the viewing areas might be for these two?
Sure. There's a couple of things. I actually met, Rajiv and I went down and walked and met with some of the business owners to let them know what was going on. Bar Louie is having a bridge party.
Great.
But for a public viewing area, you could use to the west on the north side, right by the Rotary Building, the area just right there. And then the sidewalks on Dempster Street will be open throughout, keeping pedestrian access. They'll have to be closed as safety allows as needed, but those are probably the best areas to watch.
Great. Thank you.
And Matt, we think the webcam will be in place at the Rotary Building?
Yes, we're working to get it implemented.
Very good. Again, Madam Mayor, unless there's any other questions, a great project. We are having a press conference Thursday morning at 10:30 with several of our state officials. We've also invited all the former aldermen who have been involved in this process. And Matt, maybe you could just come up. Have we heard from some of the former aldermen?
Actually, I've made calls over last week and then today, as well as emails. A few are not able to join us, but
Are they blocking our emails?
No, not at all. Just time commitments already going otherwise.
So those that will be there, maybe could you mention just briefly who is expected? State officials?
For state officials, of course, Senator Schoenberg, Representative Biss will be there, Commissioner Suffredin as well will be in attendance, as well as CTA President Forrest Claypool.
Thank you again. And then lastly, we're going to try to do a rundown each council meeting over the summer of summer events, and the big event in Evanston this coming weekend is the 33rd Annual Fountain Square Art Festival. 225 juried artists are expected in the downtown, so we encourage everyone to come out and participate in this 33rd annual event, which is sponsored by the Evanston Chamber of Commerce. And that, Madam Mayor, concludes my reports.
Thank you. City Clerk, you don't seem to be on this agenda, but do you have any communications for us?
I can hold it for next meeting, Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Next is citizen comment. Citizen comment is an important part of council meetings. We welcome comments from all citizens, and we encourage the expression of different opinions and viewpoints. Comments from concerned citizens are another reason that makes the city of Evanston a remarkable place to live. As for the Kendall matter, the city's Board of Ethics concluded its independent investigation and determined that there was no conflict of interest regarding the Kendall matter. Pursuant to Council Rule 6.4, that matter is concluded and beyond the jurisdiction of the council. All further redundant comments made on this subject made by any speaker will be ruled out of order. No further redundant and duplicative comment, such comment which has gone on for over 16 months, will be heard on the Kendall matter at this or any other council meeting. This ruling is in accordance with the council rules, the holding of the U.S. Supreme Court in Perry Education Association versus Perry Local Educators Association, and Section 206G of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. All speakers should keep in mind that the tone of comment should be civil. The first speaker on an agenda item is Jeff Smith.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm going to ad-lib a little bit. I notice this podium is in a new place than it's ever been. So near as I can tell, my backside is to the cameras. Some might say that's my best side, but I'm not sure that it's in keeping with Video 101. And if the council could find a way to let the home audience, which has to be larger than this audience, see what people are saying, I think it would be a public service. I'm here to comment on the update on the Climate Action Plan. Credit needs to be given where credit's due. It's a good report. And by that, I'm not commenting on the slickness of it, but it's good that it is being reported. It's good that what's being reported is being done. The report demonstrates the city's commitment not just to one big climate action reduction strategy, but to a wide breadth of strategies that are having impact. We may not know the ways they all have impact any given year, but we have to believe that cumulatively it adds up. There are those who could quarrel or quibble with some of the metrics or some of the methods reflected in the report or things that we might be doing better, and I might be among them. But tonight's not the time to do that because that would detract from the overall big holistic picture, which is that Evanston's trying, and not just Catherine Hurley, but a lot of the city staff working in conjunction with the Director of Sustainability, from the fleet managers to the folks in Public Works who are trying to do everything a little bit better. Climate change didn't happen from one big horrible thing. It happened from many cumulative decisions over mainly the past 2 centuries. And we won't reverse it with one big dramatic thing. We'll do it with little things like the grasses that you can see when you walk up to on the rear entrance of the Civic Center. A keen eye will note some switchgrass and some prairie dropseed, some native plants, and those are putting deep taproots into the soil that are helping water retention and bit by bit doing a little bit to reduce our water use and thus our electricity use. And it's with those types of steps that we will, we hope, all make progress. Again, I thank the city for its commitment to reducing our carbon footprint and to doing what we can to make ourselves a more sustainable community. Hopefully one day running everything by sustainable to see if it could be a little bit greener will be as routine as running everything by legal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on non-agenda items are BK Rao and Padma Rao.
BK Rao, 2246 Sherman Avenue. My comments are approved by my attorney. There is an item, it's about Tree City USA Award. You brag about receiving a Tree City USA Award, but you refuse to save the trees. I submit that your actions make your award totally Hello. Trees are a living part of our history. Trees are protected by the city code. If this council is willing to follow its own code. But the council did not follow the city code's requirement for tree protection. It passed a resolution 9-0 without a discussion. It makes no sense that you forbid taxpayers from even talking about the consequences of your actions. Just because your mayor cannot take the heat, it doesn't mean the issues will go away. All trees should be protected and history should be preserved. It is important for the trees at Kendall property also. I shall return, and respect goes both ways. It's not a one-way street.
Thank you. Padma Rao, 2246 Sherman. My comments were approved by my attorney. Your agenda includes claims about a Tree City USA award and a so-called climate action plan. I submit that touting an award and giving lip service to a plan are a pointless waste of taxpayers' funds and time when your actions show a total disregard for trees in general and for their beneficial effects in reducing greenhouse gases specifically. Based on textbooks, trees produce the oxygen that we depend on to survive. Trees remove carbon dioxide, a harmful greenhouse gas, from the air. And trees created and maintain the breathable atmosphere that we all need to live. Therefore, the fate of trees and the fate of people are tightly connected. Trees also increase the value of real estate. Even my recent ComEd bill includes an insert stating that trees save energy. Your city code, section 617.6, requires that, quote, existing trees shall be preserved in place wherever possible, end quote. But you ignored this mandatory clause in the city code and voted to kill over 24 mature trees in a one-block area for no reason. You refused to allow any discussion of the ecological consequences of your vote. Instead, you attack us repeatedly when we ask that you enforce the code to protect the trees, some of which are hundreds of years old. You turn off the microphone when we speak for trees, which are our oldest neighbors and our links to history. But trees have no voice to speak for their own lives. Your mayor's claims that the public cannot discuss the trees at Kendall are false. Kendall is on the agenda for tomorrow's Preservation Commission meeting. Kendall is on the agenda for tomorrow's Preservation Commission meeting. Your first board member stated on April 10th that she was still having closed-door meetings regarding Kendall. The city is still expending taxpayers' resources on the matter.
Conservation Commission tomorrow, according to their agenda. It is far from over if you are expending city resources and city time on it. Redundancy only comes into play if you do not restrict the time. You do restrict the time. My speech fits easily within 3 minutes, but you need to not interfere and you need to leave the microphone on. What are you so afraid of? It takes 3 minutes if you'll leave me alone and speak. What are you hiding? How bad is the wrongdoing? Turn the microphone back on and allow me the 3 minutes unmolested that the Constitution guarantees. I am aggrieved by this council's actions. I have the right to petition for redress of the grievance for as long as I see fit. I come and I speak at the appointed place and time. Turn the microphone back on. I stand on my First Amendment rights. Turn the microphone back on. The U.S. Supreme Court held the same.
City Manager, the next item is Hispanic Outreach
Move
Report.
to the next agenda item without...
Madam Mayor, members of the council, again, good evening. We're very pleased tonight to have several special orders of business. First is
for you to hide this
First is regarding Hispanic outreach. The second is regarding our safety goal for the year, and our third is the climate action plan. I'd like to ask Adelita Hernandez and our library director, Karen Lyons, to come. We're very pleased that both Karen and Adelita have been able to work together on our Hispanic outreach program. It's something that we feel very strongly about. This evening, we will be talking to you about some new website work that we've been able to do on this, as well as some additional community programs that we're doing dealing with Hispanic population. As I think many of you are aware, during the 2010 census, we had an increase in Hispanic members in our community, and we believe that the work that we're doing is going to be very useful in outreach to those folks, and so we're very pleased tonight to have both Karen Lyons and Adelita Hernandez, and I believe Ms. Lyons, our library director, is going to start with our presentations. Ms. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. You're doing it ready? Okay. In December of last year, the Evanston Public Library hired a young woman who's been doing a remarkable job in creating programs and reaching out to the Latino community to bring more programming and more services to that community. Just a couple of highlights on the resources that we have. We have almost 4,200 print items in our collection, as well as a number of juvenile materials and databases which you can very easily search and translate into Spanish. I draw your attention now to our homepage, and on the upper left-hand corner, where the arrow is right now, when you first go to our homepage, there's a drop-down menu for English or Spanish. So just by clicking Espanol, the entire homepage is then translated. When you go deeper into our webpage, into many of the databases, and especially our Gale research databases, which the council approved the continuation of recently, there are a number of different types of languages that we can translate to, again from a drop-down menu. And as you can see, among the many, and it goes much further down, is Spanish. So once again, you can translate your results into Spanish. You can translate your initial search into Spanish with just the click of a mouse. We also have, in terms of resources, there's the Mango language resources. And if you've not gone to our webpage and looked at that, not only can you learn as a non-native speaker a variety of languages, including Spanish, Italian, French, but you can also, if you so choose, learn to talk like a pirate. And you can practice that in preparation for the September Talk Like a Pirate Day. We have done a number of programs in partnership with the city manager's office and with other groups. We, again, are looking at where we place the programs, when we have the programs, and the audience that we
we bring in. And we've had a variety of successes, but I think we're building interest and we're building loyalty. We have programs for young children. We have storytelling. We have many story times at our Dempster Dodge Reading Stop, which is open for the summer, and I invite you to join us over there. We have music films, we have knitting, we have storytelling, we have computer classes, a whole variety of programs for families, for adults, for new learners, and for the youngest among us, our children. We have a couple programs coming up that I hope to highlight, and again, you are welcome to attend any of these programs. One is Angels Speak, and these are workshops and activities to bring in all members of the Latino community. We lead these programs in Spanish and in English, as we do many of our book discussions. So as you see, there's a whole series in June and July for Angels Speak. And then we have this 6 intercambrio language exchange sessions with an instructor that we're working with from District 65. All of these programs have free admission. Some require some registration because space is limited. But again, they're all free and open to the public, and we invite you to any of these programs as well. We're going to continue working with the city manager's office. We are continuing to look at new partnerships in the community, and we are also beginning to assess our results so that we can fine-tune our programs and make sure that we are placing programs in the proper locations at the proper time so that we have the biggest audience. And we are constantly building brand loyalty, and I hope that you can join us. Whether you speak Spanish or not, we have wonderful programs, and you're all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Burris?
I was wondering if you could demonstrate talking like a pirate. We really don't hear that very often, so I'm just wondering, what does that mean, and who teaches that?
Matey, and me and my parrot will show up, and we'll swashbuckle you. No, it's an interactive, or perhaps we'll swashbuckle.
Be careful, I'm about to turn the microphone.
Yes. It's a lot of fun, and go to the Mango site and see it. We're toying with the idea of doing something, talking like a pirate, but the kids love it. Grandparents love it, and it's just a lot of fun, and it's a nice way to ease into a language if you feel that there's no way that you can learn something new. Have fun, start talking like a pirate, and then perhaps you'll want to speak French or Italian or Spanish as well. It is fun.
Alderman Grover? Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Director Lyons. I had a week before last, you came and had an interesting discussion with the Central Street Neighbors Association, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the questions was about the ability of the library to acquire materials in Spanish language materials for the collection, and were there barriers? Did you have problems finding the materials that you wanted? Was it available to you? I can't remember exactly what the question was, but.
Historically, the major publishing houses have not had a very deep catalog in Spanish, but the library profession nationally and internationally has been working with the publishers, and we find more and more high-quality print materials available in a number of languages, including Spanish. The American Library Association sends librarians every year to Mexico. There's a Guadalajara book fair, and so there's the ability to connect with new publishers from Mexico and other Latin countries to bring more materials back.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, perhaps you didn't hear the preamble, so let me just perhaps give that preamble, just a shortened version of it. We're here tonight to talk a little bit about what we're doing, reaching out to our Spanish-speaking population, and we really do this in two major ways. One, through what Director Lyons has said, through the work at the Evanston Public Library. The rest comes through the city manager's office and our citizen engagement division, and Adelaide Hernandez, who's been with the city a number of years, is a part of that team. And so the second part of her presentation tonight is to talk more broadly about what we're doing, not only citywide, you'll hear a little bit about the electronic and internet pieces, but also what we're doing to really connect with those residents. Mayor Tisdale has really challenged us to find more and more native Spanish speakers to be part of our boards and commissions, and really to try to make the Hispanic community in Evanston more part of our city government on a day-to-day basis. So you've heard the first part from the librarian. Now Ms. Hernandez has the rest of that presentation.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, City Clerk, and City Manager.
I'm going to go through some of the things that we're trying to expand right now in order to be a more holistic approach to the way that we outreach to our residents, specifically the Latino community in Evanston, which is growing every day. One of the things that we're doing is
Lita, before you go too far, I hope that maybe you'll paraphrase some of this in Spanish so that folks that may be watching on television can get this in Spanish as well.
Sure. Way to put me on the spot there. So the first thing that we're doing is we've incorporated a Google, that we misspelled, sorry about that, Google Translate piece to the entire city. So if you go to the main page, you will be able to find this piece. And right now, you could see the way it looks once you've clicked into Spanish. So we're working on tweaking it, admittedly, because it is a service that isn't a live human translation. There are a lot of things that don't come out exactly correct, but we're working on trying to do some sort of hybrid between translations that we do in-house and some of this Google Translate piece. But the benefit of this Google Translate tool is that it's available in 64 languages. So not only are we going to be outreaching to our Latino community, but all the other segments of our population. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say what I said after each slide. Si nos están viendo en español, les quería hablar sobre una cosa que vamos a hacer en la ciudad. Hemos incorporado Google Translate que les ayudará a poder accesar la página web de la ciudad en varios lenguajes, incluyendo español y 64 otros lenguajes. The second piece is we are maintaining a Spanish language page that just went live. I'm going to see if I can click on this. And just let me give a disclaimer. We just went live with it, and we're working on building it, and hopefully in a month it's going to look fantastic, and everybody will love it. But there's going to be a few things to it. One will be static information. There's a lot of things that we are mandated to translate. We have a lot of HUD or CDBG type letters that go out, some of the rental requirements, some of the more legal documents for the city, and we're going to make them accessible on this page so that people can just come right on and download the information. We're doing it anyway, so we might as well give them a centralized location. Additionally, as we move along, a lot of our press releases get translated, and just as information seems more pertinent, we're going to make sure it's available and easy to locate. Additionally, there are events that aren't in the city, but that we don't necessarily have the staff or the organizations in town, but that residents would be willing to travel to neighboring communities, so we're going to make that information available on a calendar that will be separate, and we'll just list these types of events, like when we had our Mexican consulate event, which I'll touch on later, in other communities. So if somebody missed it, wasn't in town, they'll still know where to go. So let me show you the website. Okay, so here it is. Like I said, work in progress. We have a logo, and our tagline is your resource for information about Evanston in Spanish, and that is su recurso para información sobre Evanston en español. So as you scroll through here, this piece will change. It'll all be in Spanish. There'll be additional tabs describing some of the work that I just touched on earlier. As you can see, a lot of our workshops and things are collaborations with the library and other organizations in town, so we're going to try to highlight whatever is up and coming, or one of the more prominent events. So we have this Los Angeles Hablan, which Karen talked about. This is when we did the Mexican consulate event. We had the information, and I started populating. I just wanted you guys to get some idea of what it would look like. So, where do I put my city sticker? That's a common problem. People will put it on the other side, because Chicago does that. So in order to avoid all that extra traffic and people getting confused, there's a nifty little thing that I translated that I've added things like that. We also have a feed from our Twitter in Spanish. So now we're on Twitter in Spanish. We have 10 followers, so we're hoping to get more.
How many on our English Twitter?
We have 3,104 last time I checked earlier today. So we're far from there, but soon enough, right? Okay, so now I'm going to try to figure out how to get back to my PowerPoint here. And I'm just going to say what I said in Spanish really quickly. Otra de las cosas que vamos a hacer en la ciudad es ofrecer información en español para todos los residentes. Estamos empezando una página de web dedicada al lenguaje en español, donde tendremos permisos y información de diferentes eventos de la ciudad.
y como va pasando el tiempo va a estar más y más información disponible.
Alderman Grover has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. What is the Twitter feed for the City of Evanston in Spanish?
So I'm going to talk about that right now so I can explain it. So you can learn how to speak Spanish like a pirate maybe, so. Yes.
That'll be our next Twitter feed.
Yes. So this is our Twitter feed. I did a screenshot of it earlier today. It's all in Spanish, and I'm the one that tries to tweet about it. I try to pick events that I think will be interesting or pertinent to the community, and I'm trying to follow as many Spanish Twitter handles as I can that will offer information. So one of the things that I tweeted after I took this was the CDC actually has a Spanish Twitter language, so the Center for Disease Control, so they have a lot of interesting articles and things that we can loop back that, and it will be a resource just to us for our residents. So, like I said, that's a screenshot, but I'm going to click on it and show you. Okay. So here it is. See, there it is, CDC, and here this tweet is talking about, you know, it's vacation season. If you have diabetes, check out these tips for your health. So it's something that we might not have available, but it's important, and so now people will be able to access it. So you can just, you know, follow us if you have. I know a lot of you have Twitters now, so I expect to see you as following the city. We have pictures on here and people just getting more and more information, and a lot of times people ask questions, and my hope is that as we grow, we'll have more and more interaction with residents and it'll be a source of information. Twitter is much smaller in following just generally than Facebook, but there are studies that they've done, and there's a much larger percentage of Latinos and African Americans on Twitter than on Facebook. So we think that this will be a good way to just try to reach out to residents too. Did I answer your question, Alderman Grover? You did. I'm tweeting now. Okay. Okay, so también hemos lanzado una página de Twitter en español y nos pueden seguir. La sigla es twitter.com Evanston Español. Ahí tendrán información de diferentes organizaciones y la ciudad de Evanston en español para poder darles más recursos. All right, so now I'm going to talk about some of the other partnerships that we're doing in the community. District 65 has launched a Leadership Institute. They did their first inaugural class. They graduated about a week ago. The mayor was one of the people I came to honor them, and they were very excited to have you, Madam Mayor. And I linked back to one of the articles. It was a group of 18 parents who met once a week for 9 weeks and talked approximately 2 hours about different things that are important for leadership in the community, both in education and just generally. And we're hoping that this can create a portal to the residents to be able to have more dialogue about the way we make decisions in government. So I've met with the group again, and they seem very interested, so I'm hopeful that they'll continue to work with the city. They have some events lined up, and we want to support them because that way we don't duplicate and we can offer more services to the residents. So if you go on our website and also on our Spanish Twitter, you'll see a link to this event, and you can learn more about it. The instructor for the Institute Leadership is also the same gentleman who's running the intercambios, which are these dialogue events that the library is holding where English-speaking residents and Spanish-speaking residents meet together and practice their language skills, so it's mutually beneficial. I don't know if you can't click on the picture. Okay, another thing is
Annalita, could I say one thing? I wanted to say I made a wonderful speech because Annalita translated it for me, so my Spanish was perfect. But I appreciated being invited, and the one thing they did impress upon me, along with a willingness to serve on our boards and commissions, which is terrific. I hope some of them have sent in the applications, but the other thing they said was what a wonderful job the library is doing. So congratulations.
So the other piece is the Mexican Consulate. We've had a pretty good partnership with them for, now we've done an event with them for 3 years. Every year we do this 3-day series where people are able to come to the city. They don't have to worry about transit to Chicago or standing in line or parking, because we have all those things that are much easier to deal with than the embassy location. And every time we have the event, we always serve between 400 and 600 people in 3 days, and you don't even notice it. I mean, the operations at the city continue, and it's always been a really positive thing. I always have people asking, when's the next one? Are we going to do another one? And so it's something that I think that is really beneficial, and it shows the power of partnership with organizations. So my hope is that we can expand to start connecting with some of the federations from individual states in Mexico so that they can become part of this event and we can serve more residents with different services. And they're very willing and happy. They think that we're gracious hosts, and they love coming to the city of Evanston. And of course, the Evanston Public Library. So those are the things that are on the horizon right now, and we just hope that it keeps expanding. También tenemos muchos programas con otras organizaciones de la ciudad. Uno de ellos es el Instituto de Liderazgo, que el Distrito 65 ofrece para padres que hablen español. Ahí pueden aprender sobre programas de liderazgo en la comunidad y educación para sus hijos. Y nosotros vamos a apoyar al distrito con este evento y esperemos que se involucren en él para que puedan ser más activos en su comunidad y en las decisiones que toma el gobierno de la ciudad de Evanston. También tenemos un programa que hacemos con el Consulado Mexicano, que viene cada año a tramitar matrículas y pasaportes mexicanos para facilitarle a los residentes estos servicios. Y también la Biblioteca Pública de Evanston ofrece varios servicios que queremos que los residentes aprovechen para poder expandir y ver qué tipos de servicios le interesan a los residentes. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We're very excited about this. I think there's a lot of opportunities, not only on the electronic side, but also face-to-face, and we'll be back as those partnerships continue to evolve. The next is an update on one of the City Council's goals for 2012, and that is safety. We have really two parts of that presentation. Police Chief Rich Eddington is here, and I think wants to walk through sort of some of the larger safety issues that we're facing in the community. And then after his presentation, Suzette Robinson, our Director of Public Works, will talk very specifically about one area, and that is the area of pedestrian safety, and we're here this evening with some specific thoughts moving forward there. With that, Chief Eddington, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. City Manager, Madam Mayor, Mr. Clerk, and Alderman. I want to walk through an overview of some general public safety issues and then get to the specifics of traffic safety. The first thing I'd like to mention is that Part 1 crime is down 12% year to date. I think this is a significant issue. It is a measurement that means something across the nation when you measure these numbers. Now, once again, I'm thrilled that it's down that much. We still have some more work to do. It's early in the year yet, but we will keep focused on this, and it will be a measurement of how well we do. Also at this time of year, the summer plan commences. That's one car on overtime every night from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. The problem-solving team's hours have been adjusted to work primarily the afternoon shift, so they're more available to the black captains and others who are more out and available during the summertime. Also, with the help of Erica Storley, we've revamped the summer brochure, which speaks to our young children and focuses on their needs during the summer, and I'll make sure that you all have a copy of that before you leave this evening. I'd also like to highlight some of the efforts we make that make law enforcement more effective in the city of Evanston. What you see here is a picture of the AJ Mini Mart. I would like to highlight our partnership with our federal partners that dealt with this investigation. This location was significantly involved in link card fraud and also became a hub of the stolen cell phone trade. With our federal partners, we're able to engage in an investigation that identified that illicit use of link cards, and further, we have turned over to the Secret Service the information so they can trace the money internationally. Further, the Homeland Security is continuing part of this investigation. Now, as we talk about all those literally global issues, how does this impact Evanston? One of the rock bottom brass tacks, this is what works, is without this location being a ready place to sell the cell phone you have stolen for 25 or 30 bucks, as that market dries up, it is a disincentive for further thefts of those items. And so once again, even in these global initiatives, it gets down to what makes it better for the citizens of Evanston. I'd like to also mention that the Evanston Police Department recently received a national award for Best Dressed Police Department under 250 members. I want to highlight the efforts of Detective Anna Ostap in putting together that award. She did a very nice job, and I think it's significant as we continue to garner national attention for our efforts in many phases of police work. I'd also like to mention that there'll be an outdoor roll call at Popeyes down on Howard Street this Friday at 6 p.m. It further highlights our partnership with the 24th District and Chicago Police Department. And if you look at some of the better works that have been written, even in the police world of literature, which I realize is a small fraction of literature, there's not a big component of that at the Evanston Public Library even, but one of the titles is Collaborator Perish by Bill Bratton, and that is exactly what we need to do, and I think the efforts I've highlighted here tonight in the crime speak directly to that. Before we pivot to traffic safety, I'd like to call forward Sergeant Pat Moran. Sergeant Moran has recently been assigned to the traffic unit. As you know, Tom Moore was promoted to commander and is currently running the day shift. So I'd like Sergeant Moran to introduce himself to you and the community for his efforts and his plans for the traffic unit in the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Madam Mayor, City Manager, Clerk Green, and esteemed members of the council. Like the chief said, my name is Pat Moran. I'm a sergeant with the Evanston Police Department. I've been a police officer for 33 and a half years, 21 and a half with Evanston. I have a vast amount of experience on 2 other agencies as well as Evanston. I've been in the Detective Bureau. In 2008, Chief Eddington created the new TAC unit. So I was able to supervise that TAC unit, and we did some pretty excellent police work, and they continue to do so. However, my first love was the Traffic Bureau. I did 3 years in the Traffic Bureau from about 2004, and it was, out of 33 years, it was the best time I ever had in my career of law enforcement. Seems funny to say because a lot of people think all we do is go out there and write tickets and hassle people and everything. But actually, and I say this to a lot of people who question that or ask me about that, it's the best job on the department. I'm privileged to supervise highly intelligent, hardworking, dedicated police officers that I believe make an excellent impact with the city through their traffic enforcement, their crash investigations. And I believe, as the chief will show, there's been a decrease in traffic crashes, which I think our Traffic Bureau is responsible for a lot of that. I have corresponded with some of you about some traffic issues already that aldermanic requests take top priority. I know Alderman Grover, I spoke to you about cell phones, and Alderman Braithwaite have an issue over there at the alley in Washington, and then Church Street over there for speeding. So I'm getting 311 requests. So I'm trying to come up to speed with how busy this job is. I had no idea, being just a lowly traffic cop, that as a supervisor, I've been to more meetings within the last 2 months. My head is spinning. And Rajiv will say I've been late on a couple of them because I'm like, I thought the meeting was at 1:30, but it was actually 1, and so whatever. So anyways, I do enjoy what I do. You'll have an ear, and you can expect accountability from me. and hopefully I'll give you the results that you're looking for. So I look forward to working with everybody, and thank you for letting me introduce myself.
Thank you.
This will be the formal presentation for the Traffic Bureau. The Traffic Enforcement Bureau is staffed by 1 sergeant, 6 police officers, and 1 civilian. It's implemented, its goal is the implementation of traffic services citywide. Here's a partial list of their responsibilities, and as you can see, it's wide-ranging. Frankly, one of the things that I am most proud of and I think is most significant is the work that our civilian, Mr. Rebelard, does with the installation of child safety seats. As a relatively new grandfather, these things were quite a mystery to me, and so I appreciate his expertise in the installation of those items to make those young passengers safe in our cars. And so I think this is a significant service that we provide that oftentimes goes unheralded, but is truly critical to occupant safety. We also, you can see from this list of issues, our work in the school zones is significant to us, as our other enforcement efforts. It is important that the officers know what they're doing. This is a highly trained, certified group of officers that know how to investigate accidents and do accident reconstruction, which is literally a science. They are fantastic at that. We have a number of officers that are certified in that and can reproduce a rather chaotic scene and explain what happened. Also on the slide, it shows the 482 child safety seats we installed in 2011, which again, as I said, is extremely significant to occupant safety. And I really can't make a presentation without mentioning awards for the department. And once again, I'm pleased to announce these, I'm pleased to highlight these, but they are the recognition of the efforts of the men and women you see every day serving and protecting on the streets of Evanston. This National Safety Award was significant, and please understand, as an insight into the blue subculture I live in, any police chief you'll find is that same type A competitive personality that wants to win. So I think it's quite an accomplishment when we do that. Enforcement activity, I want to highlight our efforts through the use of IDOT funds, and essentially the $24,000 plus we received resulted in almost 400 additional hours of enforcement of traffic laws. This is a substantial impact on the public's perception of how rigorously we enforce traffic laws, and is critical to compliance with those traffic laws. Enforcement results in these IDOT-funded efforts, the 17 DUI arrests and 13 suspended drivers, I think are significant. To take that number of impaired drivers off the road, at a minimum, we're saving their life and probably someone else's. Also, with the focus we have on seat belts and cell phones, I think this speaks directly to the Traffic Bureau implementing the articulated goals of the City Council in making this a safe city to walk about in. These results of the 19,000 citations that were issued, half of those were issued by the members of the Traffic Division. There's a breakdown of what they were issued for, and I would like to highlight the seat belts and cell phones. And just as an administrative aside, I think this is critical because we track the vast majority of those into administrative adjudication rather than the Skokie court system. I think that's a win-win for both the city and the driver. In a lot of ways, cuts down on the investment of time by both parties, and basically sidesteps the points on the license, and also allows the city to recoup those fine monies that are levied by our administrative judges. Yearly crash summary, once again, we're trending down, which is an extremely positive thing. And we focus on all accidents. I think in the following presentation, you may see some variation in numbers, but we do all accidents. The engineers are more primarily or only focused on roadway accidents. And as you see, the notable decrease since 2008 in the last line of this slide. 2012 comparison, and once again, we're down another 7.5, which I think is significant in the number of crashes. Here's how we divide up the injury crashes, and once again, transports to the hospital. And what this gets down to is failure to yield and too much speed for 46 and 24% respectively, and then 5% was alcohol related. 2012 crash injuries basically track those same stats that I just mentioned. Failure to yield right away and speed were the leading cause of crashes. Traffic crashes involving bicycles in 2011, 65, year-to-date 18. Those stats are included in the previous slides. Bicycle enforcement in 2011, 62, 2012, 20 year-to-date. And that obviously takes place primarily in the downtown section. I think you've seen some press releases recently where we've used the traffic sign we've used in the traffic truck to caution downtown bicyclists to stay off the sidewalk. Top 10 crash locations. One of the things that Sergeant Moran has available to him is tracking these locations so he can deploy his resources accordingly. And once again, we write at these locations so as to reduce the number of crashes. And once again, all areas, all locations have shown a reduction in crashes for the fifth straight year. With that, we're going to pivot to traffic enforcement or traffic engineering perspective. Before we go there, are there any questions that I can answer this evening?
Madam Mayor.
Alderman Rainey.
Can you tell us a little more about the traffic truck? I don't think everybody in our viewing audience knows about that.
As part of our national award that we received at the International Associations of Police Chiefs Conference last October in Chicago, we won the use of a Chevy Suburban for a year. With that came a lot of bells and whistles and also an electronic signboard that we have used for our traffic safety checkpoints, and also we found ways to utilize that, much like I mentioned in the bicycle enforcement, to call to the attention of bicycle riders that things have changed. Your downtown now, you need to be in a bike lane and not on the sidewalk, which is a continuing issue in the downtown area with the number of sidewalk cafes and dense pedestrian traffic. The speed of the bicycles and the speed of the walkers don't mix well. So once again, we utilize the rewards we're given to further traffic enforcement.
What would you say is the value of that vehicle to us?
Well, it's my understanding at the end of the year, Ford Motor Company will assess how many miles we've put on it and then tell us what they want for us to purchase it from them. But if you went out and bought that vehicle today, that's about $60,000 worth of truck. It's if you haven't seen it, you need to stop by sometime. It's a fancy truck.
It's fully loaded.
It is. It's got a lot of neat stuff. I've never been in a police vehicle with a sunroof before, so that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Alderman Grover.
I think I took a look at some of our crash data earlier this year, and the injury crash rate since 2009, so for the years 2010 and 2011, had dropped by about 17.6%, which by my reckoning, given the number of, this is just injury crashes that produce an injury, accounts for a reduction in about 60 injury crashes over those 2 years, which I think is significantly improved safety on our streets if we can reduce the injury crashes by 30 a year. I think that's quite an improvement, and I credit our traffic unit and your officers for having a lot to do with this great reduction in the injury crash rate.
Thank you. I will make sure that members of the traffic unit hear your comments, and as we look at the number of citations issued and the number of traffic stops made, that all contributes to the consciousness of drivers that the traffic laws will be enforced here, which slows them down, which is a huge contributor to the number of accidents we deal with.
Thank you. I think you've answered everything.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No.
Thank you.
Alderman Rainey.
The 10 top crash locations are very enticing to want to talk about and get involved in. And I'm wondering if those of us who are interested, who don't want to take up everybody's time, do you have analysis showing or indicating why you think these locations are the highest, the 10 highest?
Well, I think there's a couple of indicators, right?
You don't have to get into it now. I'm sure they're all different.
Well, I think there's several key things. And the first one is traffic volume. These are some of our busier intersections, but if there is an intersection in your ward that you're particularly concerned about, I'd be happy to sit down with an alderman, Sergeant Moran, and myself to go over the whys and wherefores, and a lot of it in a gross picture will be related on the speed and failure to yield, especially in intersections. You can bet that it's over 50% of those accidents will be based on somebody failed to yield at an intersection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Madam Mayor, to continue the discussion, Suzette Robinson is here. As Chief Eddington said, I think from a traffic engineering, public works standpoint, to look at issues of pedestrian safety. We've heard from many of you concerned that we need to take additional steps to increase safety in the community. So in addition to going through an overview of some statistics, Ms. Robinson has some recommendations to make for some next steps. Ms. Robinson, good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Clerk Green, and City Manager. I'm Suzette Robinson, the Director of Public Works. So some of the first information I wanted to go through, Chief Eddington, as he indicated, we take a look at his data and we break it down in terms of providing more detail to really identify kind of what type of accident and where it happened. So the data that we presented for you had the on-street accidents are, our numbers are slightly different because we eliminate private property in anything that happens in an alley. So we really look at the public right-of-way, so to speak. And so as you can see, over the last 20 years, we've had a huge decline in on-street accidents, and more specifically in pedestrian accidents, which really have been reduced by 50% in the last 20 years. And some of the reasons, That's not on. Just stop. No. There's a wireless accident. So just Got it? Yep. No, that's the same one. What? Oh, that's a good.
Pedestrian accidents are down, computer accidents are up.
Well, see, that's why we have a backup, because everybody has the presentation, everybody in the audience has the presentation before them, so we can continue on if the city manager so desires.
Absolutely.
Okay? So Quickly, I wanted to go over some of the reasons that for the reduction, the 50% reduction that I mentioned earlier. It really has a lot to do with the traffic flow. So our traffic signal upgrades have had a huge impact. And one of the things that some people may not know is that part of that upgrade also included it goes to an R-red for 3 seconds. So what that means is when the light changes to yellow, and just in case somebody decides to come through a hair past that, and that happens, the opposite traffic still has a red. So they have a red for an additional 3 seconds. So basically everybody has a red before the light turns green. So I think that also has had a tremendous impact on reducing the traffic impacts. The other things is just the traffic measures, the signs, the markings. Speed hump, we've done a lot of traffic calming to slow traffic down. We also incorporated some of the traffic circles, some of the neighborhoods. We did cul-de-sacs. Some of the one-way streets were also designed as a way to reduce the amount of cut-through traffic, which was also impacting the residential streets. The other thing is just, resurfacing. When you got better streets, that also has had an impact of reducing the number of accidents that cars have. The maintenance, the snow removal improvements, the de-icing and anti-icing that occurs ahead of time. Technology has just gotten better in terms of snow removal. That has really also had an impact. We've been doing stricter traffic control enforcement in terms of the right-of-way permitting. Also, the pavement restoration, we've been holding contractors accountable for the cuts that they make in our street, making sure that they repair them properly. And the police went over all the various enforcement activities that they do to also help support that. And we think the cell phone ban has also had an impact in terms of reducing distracted driving.
And Suzette, I think at this point, why don't you just speak to the handout?
Okay.
And if we don't have copies in the audience, we'll get some copies made.
Well,
the
the rest are out on the table, but I think I pretty much gave everybody a copy.
Okay, so why don't we just speak
before.
to that, and we'll keep working on the slides.
Okay. So the next slide is the pedestrian accident location map from 2009. And as you can see, we've plotted where all the accidents, so there were 67 pedestrian accidents in 2009, and as you can see, they're kind of all over the city. What I also added to the map, so you could, just for reference purposes, in yellow is where all the schools are located, and in green are where all the parks are located. So then you can see where the pedestrian accidents occur in relative to those two areas. The next slide is the 55 pedestrian accidents that occurred in 2010. And then the following 52 in 2011. And the last slide, well, not last slide, but the last map shows the pedestrian accidents where we had 2 or more accidents. And so I wanted to spend a minute and talk a little bit about kind of what this map shows. Basically, the bigger the red circle, the more incidents that have occurred. And as you can see, Chicago Avenue tends to be a very difficult corridor, and it has a lot to do with what Chief Eddington alluded to earlier, is the volume of traffic and the activity. There's a lot of loading and unloading, the car dealerships, lots of people moving around, and you have a lot of stores, so you have a lot of pedestrian traffic as well, along with the train stations. The largest area that, and we've actually had discussion about this area, and we're hoping that we can address it as a part of the resurfacing, is the phenomena of pedestrian traffic incidents at Davis and Ridge. That is one of the largest areas that we have, and we think it has a lot to do with just the width of the road. We have the the mail drop-off, so you have people pulling off to the side, then merging back into traffic, and then a right turn lane and a bike lane. So there's a lot of stuff going on right before that intersection. So when we come back to do the resurfacing of Davis, we hope to see what we can do about either closing the lane down in terms of, or increasing pedestrian visibility in that area. Oops, nope, that's not what. Am I using this or this?
Just stick to this one. Let's use this.
Thank you. So specifically, to talk about the other areas of concern in terms of pedestrian crossings. Most of the accidents that were on the map were also at signalized intersections too. So you have a situation where whether it's a distracted driving or a right turn, not a full stop, not paying attention to the pedestrians that are waiting to cross type scenario. But one of the key areas of concern that we wanted to address are uncontrolled crossings. Those are crossings that have no traffic signals and no stop signs. So we have split our crossings into 5 categories. The designated school crossing, those locations were developed as a part of Safe Routes to School, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that whole process. That process was actually a city process. In order to apply, the school district had to be the applicant. When we met with District 65 early on to talk to them about, applying for this grant opportunity, they really didn't have the resources to put the information together. So the city really took a leadership role in terms of providing the engineering and helping prepare the application. So I just wanted everybody to know that this was actually, the city did this in partnership, and we really led the process to establish these designated routes. The next area that we looked at...
Suzette, Alderman Rainey has a question.
Suzette, and that's a wonderful thing that we were able to carry that ball for the schools, but when we did that, did we include parents or the PTA or anybody from the school?
Yes, the principals of the school, there were District 65 administrators, and the PTA was all a part of the process. So we went site by site, school by school. The next area is a fairly new designation, and that are senior crossings. So we look at the I don't want to call seniors vulnerable, but the 2 vulnerable groups in our community are the children and the seniors, because it may take a little more time for them to get across the street, so we want to make sure that those crossings are, they have a special designation as a result of that. And so right now, we have one at Chicago Avenue, and then we have 2 on Emerson Street. And then the next category are park crossings, which we have 11. And then we have special request crossings, which we are classifying as Oakton and Gray, Barton and Oakton, and Central and Broadway. And I'm going to go over later each category and describe to you what it currently has and some improvements that we have for each designation. And then other crossings, those are crossings that doesn't fall into any of those other categories of that. But they're still pedestrian crossings. So at uncontrolled designated school crossing, this is what you'll have. You'll see an advanced school crossing sign as you approach. Right at the crossing, you'll see the school crossing there in the middle at the intersection. On the side of the street, you'll have the state law sign that says stop here for pedestrians. You also will see an in-street sign as well. And then they have the high visibility marking with the ladder style markings.
Alderman Rainey?
I think we're doing a great job with the signage, et cetera, but one thing I think we could do better at is marking the pavements on the roadways for cars as well as pedestrians. And perhaps you could share with us the schedule for doing that. Do we do it every year? Do we do it on a complaint basis? How do we get crossings marked? And street paving also for traffic.
Right, we have a schedule that we follow every year. Some of it is need-based. We do our inspections every year to make sure all of the pedestrian and school crossings are identified, and we prepare a list every year of what's needed. And this year, pavement marking, however, is not funded, was not funded in CIP.
That'll be on my list of amendments then. Also, the traffic humps all need to be marked. They're not in yellow, in white. They're bad. Okay.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you. I was in New York last week and saw many of those state law stop here for pedestrians with the arrow, so it's not just Illinois. It's obviously the national standard now. And I agree with Alderman Rainey that I'd love to see our pavement markings brightened up, but I think there is an art and science to it. You don't want to do it all the same. You want them to be meaningful so that people see them, acknowledge them as a place to stop and yield to pedestrians, or at least take note of pedestrians. And you have to be careful, I think, and the technique you use to mark crossings so that they don't all look like the same pedestrian crossing, because then they're all not special. There is a science to this, and I defer to your traffic engineers.
Yes.
Director Robinson.
Yeah, and there's only certain things that we can do. And just so you know, one of the things that we talked about was, and this is similar to runway. I used to be an airport director, so I like to, and they outline the markings in black, so they paint the markings to highlight the white. So, because what happens a lot of times is the pavement markings kind of dull and the asphalt gets whiter, then you kind of lose sight of where the crossings are. So we talked about doing that. And then there's also some special markings, but once again, we're limited in terms of what we can actually put on the pavement by FHWA. So we have to be careful that we are in compliance.
But I do appreciate your willingness to think creatively, to test certain types of signage and markings to see what works and what doesn't work. And I'm happy for Evanston to be a great place to test more and more pedestrian safety measures such as these.
Alderman Burris.
It's about the crosswalk paint. It seems it fades really quickly, and I was wondering what the standard is for how long it should last. I know there's a crosswalk near my office building, and I want to say it's been there 2 years, and the paint is very faded, chipped, and it seems that it would almost make more sense to do a more quality paint that lasts longer than having to try to come out more often to do it, because I know it takes a lot of scheduling, and you can only do it when it's not raining, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, and so these 4 days you can put out crosswalks. It would be nice if we could keep those crosswalks for longer.
Yes. And just so you know, we actually use a thermoplastic coating that we actually heat, so we really don't get into painting that often. In-house, we do, on an emergency basis, we will go out and do touch-ups. And on the one hand, when I indicated that the plows can be a good thing, sometimes the snow plows, if they're too low, they actually scrape up the paint. So that's what's happening with the crosswalks as well. So,
Alderman Burris, are you done?
No, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I just want to say thank you very much for this report. I truly appreciate the efforts of Public Works and your staff. This has been really interesting and very informative. I do have a question just as a follow-up. How do you determine where the state side of the street, the state signs go? What's the process?
It's based on, right now, they're at designated school crossings. So I'm walking you through the priority system and what we put at each priority system based on priority. Because if we make every crosswalk look exactly the same, then we just didn't protect the group that we were looking to protect. So, and that's part of the evaluation process that we want. And there may be other ways that we're going to talk about, you know, how we identify the safe routes to school and maybe look at upgrading all of the pedestrian crossings in a certain manner.
So is it a certain proximity from the school? So, for example, that church in Wesley, is that, go ahead.
That's correct. That's not a designated, it's not a designated school crossing because it's too far away from the school.
Okay.
And so,
It has a crossing guard, too. It has a crossing guard.
It is?
It has a crossing guard.
It has a crossing guard. I'm sorry, it has a crossing guard. So, and just so you know that the places that are designated, because not all of this has been completed yet. Some of this will happen as a part of the Safe Route to School project. So the locations that don't have the signage will have them. So this is the standard. When we're showing you, this is the standard of what we want all designated school crossings to look like. So.
Alderman Holmes? This is reminding me of what Mr. Carson said earlier in terms of looking both ways as you cross a one-way street. No, I'm serious, because one of the things that I think has to happen is not only are we trying to bring this to the attention of the drivers, but we need to bring this to the attention of the pedestrians as they're walking, that they really, you know, this gives you sometimes a false sense of being safe, and that they need to really look before they step out. And so I think that that's a part of an education program that maybe we need to do with the schools as well as with the seniors. You know, just because it's there doesn't mean that you can just walk right out in the street, because some people just don't pay attention. And they continue to drive even though, you know, the markings are there and the stop signs are there, but they still drive like they're crazy. So, you know, we need to do some education for people who are walking as well.
Thank you, Alderman Holmes. That is one of our recommendations, that we take the leadership role in providing the education citywide.
Oops, I'm sorry. Suzette, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you. Alderman Grover has a question if you're in. Okay.
So some of the things that we want to take a look at in terms of improving the designated school crossings, an LED blinker school crossing sign, which is what you see here, and I actually saw this at a conference, and it's push button actuated. So when the kids are there, they would push the button and the sign would light to basically alert drivers that kids are getting ready to cross now. Because what happens is that when you put something there that stays there all the time, it really just becomes something else that's on the side of the road. I mean, that drivers, they get acclimated to it, and then they just drive past it. So, and I think one of those examples is you see the flashing yellow lights along Lake Avenue in Wilmette, and I would challenge you to drive down that strip, and when they're flashing, that means, you know, it's time to slow down and obey, and it's not a whole lot of that happening. Or they race in between the two, and they actually have it for the whole delineation, because Lake Avenue is very similar to Oakton in that they have multiple schools, you know, one after the other down the street. So, so the other thing we wanted to look at is the special pavement markings. There are some additional, some different type treatments that are out there, and we want to explore with IDOT what they would allow us to do in terms of putting a different type of treatment to and then also we looked at a special sidewalk marking, so for the kids to know whether we come up with some type of, whatever the symbol would be, we would also give them a sticker at the beginning of the school year to say, okay, this is where you're supposed to cross. And I think that would be very helpful in making sure that they select the safest alternative, which will not necessarily be the closest to their house. So that's the other piece, is that, you know, it's not just the educating the children in the school, we also have to educate the parents to make sure that, you know, their kids are crossing at the safest point.
Alderman Grover?
Yeah, It strikes me as we're having this discussion that it's all mostly about controlling driver behavior, and all of the signs, all of the pavement markings, all of it are simply reminders of the law that every driver should know. And when you think about it, it's got to be a combination of engineering to solve these issues, because I think every single one of us in all of Evanston have problematic streets and problematic drivers, and you get complaints about the speed of drivers and their carelessness and callousness and lack of attention. And so the solutions are engineering, enforcement, and then education. And it's still, with everything that we've invested so far, we still get so many complaints about mindless driving. And I'm still stymied as to how you address it altogether. So as I tell people when they complain to me and they're asking me to investigate speed humps, I ask them, and do me a favor, please, and drive everywhere in Evanston the way that you would like people to drive on your street. And that will go a little bit to solving our problem, because, frankly, the people who are speeding on your street and you'd like to put speed humps in to prevent them from speeding, more than likely simply your neighbors. So.
Oh, and I wanted to point out one of the other existing items that is not listed are bump outs, too, at the designated school crossings. And once again, those locations that don't have them, the Safe Route to School project, which we're starting the engineering study for that this fall to hopefully get construction completed before the school year in 2013. Okay.
Alderman Burris.
So the bump outs, I think they're really useful. I know that the bump outs along Oakton near James Park have been tremendous, and there's a sign in the middle of the street, and I think people slow down. And obviously those cost a lot of money. What I'm wondering is, as we decide where those bump outs should go, before we have all of the money to do it, but they've been designated as places for bump outs, could we do a temporary measure and using the concrete barriers? Thank you. That's what the word. Because I know when I'm driving on the highway and those concrete barriers are up, I know I slow down because I'm convinced I'll hit them. So that might be a temporary solution. And I know particularly on the Oakton and Barton, there's a lot of issues with the speeding coming across after they cross Asbury. And I think if there was concrete barriers there, it would definitely make them slow down in a way that a stop sign won't, or a crosswalk in the middle of the street will not do. And I'm not sure if you've explored that.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that as well, because where and how you use those things can really actually increase the city's liability in terms of if somebody actually hit it. So it becomes a safety issue, and there are certain things we just cannot put in the street in terms of the speed that the cars are going. It can be considered an obstruction in the right-of-way that we're actually creating. So we have to be careful, but we will look into that. I did have your message to take a look at what type of temporary measure we could do.
Alderman Wilson.
And I'll just point out, you along the lines of trying to be careful, you also want to be careful about putting things in the street that are going to push a bicycle into the traffic lane. So you don't want to get too far, so that you're pushing basically a bike into the cars. So.
Okay. All right. So the next crossing are the uncontrolled senior crossings. Basically, they have the same, very similar treatment in that they have the advance, but just the pedestrian sign as opposed to the school sign. They have an in-street sign as well in the intersection. And then the ladder style visibility marking, and they all have bump outs except one, the newest one that we did. And so we're proposing to complete bump outs as we resurface the street. So as a part of that project, we would actually do the bump outs along with that. And as you can see, we did the bump out and preserve the bike lane there in that picture.
Yes.
uncontrolled park crossings, and this is something that's fairly new for us, and it has worked really well. And that is, we started out with a pilot at Lovelace Park, and for the longest time, I used to drive up and down Ridge and I would see the pedestrians, particularly in the wintertime, walking their dogs trying to cross, not Ridge, Grosse Pointe, but it turns into Ridge, Grosse Pointe, to go to Lovelace Park, and they would stand there freezing, and the drivers would never stop, especially in the morning, and then even during rush hour. And so the Alderman asked us to take a look at that intersection. So what we installed was a flag system. And that's the treatment that has worked really well in our park settings. And so what you see down in the box below, okay, you can see it on the picture up there. So it has 4 flags, and then there's a sign. So what happens is, as you are ready to cross the street, you take a flag and you kind of wave it to get the traffic to slow down and stop. You cross the street and you put the flag across the street in the bucket on the other side. And I will say, until this past weekend, the flags that we've had at Lovelace Park have been there and stayed there, and nobody took them in the last, year and a half that we've had them in place. Now, these flags, they don't cost that much, but the kids love them. So what you'll see is that the parent will let the toddler wave the flag across the street. When they get across, they're not interested in giving it back. They want to wave the flag all the way to the beach. We recently put some on Sheridan Road at a crossing. And like I said, this past weekend, we lost virtually every flag. Because the kids are taking them. So we tried to figure out how to get, what's an unattractive flag? Do we get a flag with holes in it? But I think that kids would just like it anyway if it's something to
Get a
to
new
wave.
cheer flag.
So great idea. Anyway, so that has been a measure that we've used to improve that. So we would like to study that further to see how that would work. And once again, it has the same type of ladder style, high visibility markings as well. And once again, our goal is to eventually, try to get flags placed at all the crossings and then complete the bump outs. And the flag system is just so inexpensive for us to do. And I will say that I think that Chicago, I saw in the news, they advertised this flag system. Of course, they didn't give us credit because we did ours first, but that's another story. We're in a small town, but I think they put it at a very busy intersection. I think that, and they were having trouble getting the cars to stop, but I think with the increased visibility and, sometimes drivers aren't sure that you're crossing the street because sometimes people are standing there, and so that by waving the flag, you'll let them know, okay, I'm ready to cross right now, so then they'll slow down. The special request crossings are, and they really are the locations where we've had in-street signs and put bump outs in, and we're calling them special requests right now because they weren't designated school crossings, they weren't senior crossings, so we're actually going to take a look at either folding those types of locations into another category and just dispensing of that once we can characterize what that is better. And then the remaining uncontrolled crossings just have the standard pedestrian crossing symbol and no state law sign, except as where they have been requested. So our goal is, as the budget allows, we will complete the signage throughout the city. So that brings us to our recommendations. The first recommendation, we want to establish an evaluation committee that would consist of Northwestern's Traffic Institute, an outside traffic engineering consultant who we would hire on an on-call basis to meet with us and go over what we're doing, kind of look at some best practices in pedestrian signage and markings. The police department and the public works department would also be a part of this committee. we want to request a special city council meeting be held on August 6th in lieu of the Rules Committee. And then we wanted to, at the end, I'll ask for if there are additional study areas that you want us to take a look at as well. So what the evaluation committee would take a look at is our priority system, which in the categories that I described to you earlier, the 5 categories that we have, look at, do they make sense, what should be at each level of I don't want to call it hierarchy, but the priority system that we have, what it should contain. We're going to do a review of the safe route to school process, and then we're going to also reevaluate the crossing guard placements. One of the issues that we struggle with as it relates to Barton and Oakton in particular is that it should be, if we're going to sign it like a designated school crossing, then it needs a crossing guard. At least that's the Public Works recommendation based on the volume of traffic for the kids, for it to be the safest for kids to cross, particularly for that age population. We believe that it needs a crossing guard. So then we would establish a citywide safe route education program and just pedestrian safety in general.
Excuse me, Director, Alderman Burris has a question.
Yes.
I know you've not been all that excited about the crosswalk at Barton and Oakton because of the feedback you've gotten from that the school wants them to cross at Ridge or they want them to cross at Asbury. And that, obviously, I've been pretty vocal about that. That's frustrating for me, particularly if you look at most of the accidents are at places with lights. So Ridge and Oakton is a very scary place to cross. And watching students say they're not going to walk that far. So we need to do absolutely something, because many of the kids are crossing at Barton and Oakton, and we need to find a way to make it safer, particularly with the kids the traffic coming once again eastbound on Oakton. And I understand the crossing guard piece. It would be very helpful, and I've brought this up probably, I guess, 3 years now, when we talk about crossing guards. I don't understand where the PTA of these schools are on this. I don't know why they're not coming out in force. I don't know why District 65 isn't asking for either older students maybe from the middle school to help or the high school students to help be crossing guards. Where are the parents on this subject? And why aren't we having the PTA from these District 65 come to the council meetings? Why aren't we asking them to staff some of these crosswalks? I appreciated your map on Oakton, the map that you put. And from James Park all the way to Ridge, there's only 3 blocks that's either not a park or a school. There's nowhere else in the city. I actually went and looked at the map. There's nowhere else. And 18% of District 65 students go to school on Oakton. I think it's like 18, actually 0.2% are either at Dawes, Chute, or Oakton. So you have a huge concentrated population. I've asked for the numbers for how many people attend James Park and the lacrosse, where they play lacrosse, and Mr. Gaynor, I think, was out of town and hasn't gotten me those numbers yet. But I'd like to see those numbers as well. We're talking thousands of children every single day, and looking at the safe route to schools, I don't think it addresses the real migration or the going back and forth to these parks. So the evaluation committee needs to talk to the PTA. They need to talk to the parents at the lacrosse practices. They need to talk to the parents going to James Park that are parking on Hartree and then trying to dash their way across Oakton by the animal shelter or by Aldi, versus just engineering and police. Obviously, you are all very good at what you do, but it's being out there and worried about your kids crossing the street that hits a little home more. So thank you for putting us together. I just, once again, have huge concerns about it not just being an academic study, but really out there looking at it, walking it. Thanks.
Okay.
Alderman Rainey.
Suzette, we count cars with interns and staff members. Do we ever count pedestrians crossing?
Yes, we did with the placement of the crossing guards. We did do, as a part of the Safe Route to School study, they actually did, I think it was 2 years ago, Reggie? Yeah, 2 years ago, we actually did look at where the children were crossing, and that kind of led to where the crossings were designated and where the crossing guards were placed.
Well, did you actually count, or did you just eyeball the activity?
The crossing guards did the counts.
And how did a crossing guard, for example, count people crossing at Barton and Oakton when they were supposed to be watching kids crossing the street?
The crossing guards counted where the school was designated crossing. Walkouts of schools have been established for a number of years.
So they're not counting.
Sorry, Rajiv Dahal, senior traffic engineer.
Wait, I didn't hear your...
We count pedestrians also. We send out, I go out, I have other staff going out for locations we don't have crossing guards. But for the safe route to schools, the crossing guards counted the number of children crossing at those designated crosswalks.
But what about, I'm only using Barton and Oakton because it's no crossing.
I'm sure we have...
Who counted the kids crossing at Barton?
Staff. I'm sure we have data on that one.
Okay, I would like to know what that shows.
Sure.
And when it was done.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at a time right now when school is not in session, so it's not important to count now. But I would really like to know, before we go and invest in crossing guards, et cetera, if it's not a safe place to cross, I think as opposed to making it a safer place than it is, that we ought to work on excluding that as a place to cross. I know people do it. People are talking on their cell phones. The little girl that got hit over there was in a crosswalk. So, it all has to do with people either not paying attention as pedestrians, and that includes children, or drivers not paying any attention. So I would really like to know how many people are crossing there, kids.
Okay.
And it would be interesting to know also, not having kids in the school now, how are children educated about where not to cross? Do they send a note home with the parents and hope to God somebody reads it? Or that it actually gets home?
Alderman Grover.
I think I can answer your question, Alderman Burris, about where the parents and the PTAs are on this. The parents and PTAs did participate in a number of meetings as part of our Safe Routes to School application process, and I think I attended the meeting at Shoot School, which was really interesting, got good feedback from the folks who showed up, and I'm guessing that information, that feedback, those comments are buried deep in your Safe Routes to School files. It could probably be reproduced to you, and it was really interesting. So we do have some of that feedback, everything from the Asbury-Oakton intersection, where that gas station has, seems like 8 entrances onto the gas station, so students are having to cross how many driveways to get to that corner? Parents were well aware of that and made our staff well aware of it as well. But I think a lot of parents are simply opting out of sending their kids on sidewalks to school, and they're putting them on school buses when that's an option, or simply driving them. And I can't remember, Mr. DeHall, what you told me the statistics were, but arrival dismissal time, school arrival dismissal time traffic is, 40%? 25% greater than it is at other times, and so that's a huge volume of traffic on our streets, accounted for mostly by parents who don't want to let their children walk or ride their bikes to school. So the Safe Routes to School program has to do with education, enforcement, encouragement, and exactly what Alderman Rainey was talking about, that is the outreach to get more students to think about riding their bikes to school. Let's build the bike hub at school so you can stow it safely. Let's make sure everybody knows what the Safe Routes to School are, and not bury them in the school website or the District 65 website. So that's, I think, what the Safe Routes to School funding is going to help us do, is a lot of that research and education. Not research, outreach and education, excuse me.
Alderman Burris.
I just actually wanted to clarify for Alderman Grover. I was asking about not only feedback for the PTA, but also volunteers. And where are the parents on the street of helping at the crosswalks? Where are they helping even at the parks to help kids get across? Where I just think we could be asking the PTA to do sign-ups, even if it's with the crossing guards that we're paying, but also at the non-places that we know that they're crossing. I would assume that they're want to be just as involved with the pedestrian safety as we do. I mean, District 65 continues to be silent. What we've heard from them over and over again is we're take over once the kids get onto our property. But outside of that, they're hands off. That's a little concerning to me, but I would hope that the parents, even if the administrators do not want to be involved when it happens off of the school grounds, I would hope that the parents would want to be involved and volunteer some time to get kids to school safely.
And if I may, a lot of that depends on the school culture. So I know at Willard School they have a pretty elaborate student crossing guard program where the older students actually do put on vests and help their younger students cross. I was unable to organize anything like that at Kingsley School. So it depends upon the school, it depends upon the tradition, but I think some of the Safe Routes educational funding is going to help us start some of these programs at the other schools.
Alderman Rainey.
Well, how did you, Alderman Grover, know about the Safe Route to School meetings? Because the 3 schools on Oakton are in, and students who go there are in the 9th Ward and the 8th Ward for a good part. And I don't recall being told there was going to be this meeting at Shooting School.
I think part of it is because I was involved in the Safe Routes project at the very beginning, and my intern at the time was also on the Safe Routes to School team, and so that's...
But we did the public notice.
It's all
on a larger
city,
level.
it's all
Yeah.
Public Works. I've been on the Public Works Committee since 1983, and it would seem to me that there would have been more, because in our ward, in Colleen's ward and mine, I mean, traffic on Oakton is just like one of the biggest issues. And it would be nice if you ever have another meeting like this to let us know about it. I thought maybe it was city school liaison or something. I mean,
it was more school because it was from the schools. It was more.
But it couldn't happen without them
school-based.
doing it. I mean,
Yeah, it was a school-based.
isn't that what you're saying, that you did the applications to Safe Routes?
Well, they had to sign the applications. We did.
But you did all
Yes.
the work. I mean,
Yes.
you did the heavy lifting, and so, well,
And we did inform council along the way what we were doing and got the go-ahead to do what we were doing.
But, I mean, there were meetings at Shoot
Yes.
School, you
Yeah.
said that? I don't
Yeah,
recall hearing-
everything was done by public notice. I just don't know if the council pack, if the flyer went in the Friday packet as a part of that in terms of identifying but I'll find out for sure if that occurred. But they were all noticed as public meetings, and the public was invited to
We certainly
attend.
take the flak for the traffic, and so if we could at least play some role in it, I would appreciate it.
Oh, and the other, where I left off was the placement of permanent radar speed displays along certain routes we want to evaluate, like on Church and on Oakton, where we have a long stretch. Instead of having the mobile speed display signs that we've been using have really been quite effective. So now we're going to look at still maintaining those and kind of moving those around in some of the other areas, but also looking at permanent placement in locations. We would also identify additional sidewalk bump out locations. And then we're going to have a discussion about the citywide speed reduction of 25 miles an hour to see what the benefit, and we have to do a cost benefit associated with that because there's a lot of signs that would have to be changed over. So we would also evaluate that and come back and give you a report on on that as well.
Director Robinson, Alderman Nguyen has a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Suzette, I know that in Germany, they have radar detecting machines that when you exceed the speed limit by a certain amount, it takes your picture, the picture of your license plate, and it issues you a ticket. Well, no, different than a red light camera. Actually, this is the radar. The radar, your speed is, it actually photographs it acts like a red light camera, except it's attached to a radar screen. And in Washington, D.C., along Connecticut Avenue, for any of you who are very familiar, which has got a long, long stretch, wide streets, they have the equivalent of speed cameras hanging across the street. And if you go under them, exceeding the speed limit by a certain amount, you'll get a flash, you'll see a flash, and you are issued a ticket for speeding. So, where are those devices used, like the your speed is, that spit out a ticket besides Germany?
Chicago. Chicago just recently passed that, passed the law to do that around designated school crossings.
I didn't understand that was actually a machine that was doing it.
I'm pretty sure that the technology is there, that they're taking pictures. Now, we can add that to the evaluation list. I did not, because speed cameras have been off limits at your direction in the past, so that's why we didn't address that. But we can certainly take a look at the technology and report back to you and add that to the list.
I'm just curious as to how much it costs.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily an advocate of it. I think that there are other ways in which we've slowed traffic down, but if we have chronic speeding, then maybe that's what we have to look at.
Okay.
Alderman Braithwaite.
And just another quick follow-up question to that. I'm curious to know how much the solar-powered speed signs are, the ones that light up as soon as you drive by. Do you know how much they are?
It's $5,000 to $6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah.
And are those effective? They work for me. Whenever I see it, I slow down. So I'm just...
Well, the fact that it's push button, I think it would be more effective.
Okay.
Because when it's lit all the time, like I said, but because it was just push button. But when we go back and evaluate the sign, we'll also evaluate where they're existing, what their experiences are. We'll report all of that back to you along.
Right, I'm sorry. I meant the sign that when you drive by, it posts and flash your speed. That sign.
Oh, that sign.
The ones that you move around.
Yeah, that one's, but the solar version is $5,000? Yeah, so it's probably close to $10,000.
Okay.
The solar version.
Okay.
But the portable one is about $5,000 that we purchased.
Gotcha.
Alderman Rainey.
Suzette, what is the sign that when you drive north on Dodge right now, that's flashing your speed? What are the
speed radar?
How does that work? Is that solar? Is that?
No. That's the movable one. We have to change out the batteries.
Okay, so how much is that one?
That one's $5,000.
$5,000. We need a whole lot of those. They are, I think they're just the most effective, and in talking to constituents, they believe that also.
Yes, but part of that makes it effective is because we move them. It really does impact, because it just becomes a flashing speed limit sign if it stays there all the time. I'm
not sure about that, but if you think so, okay. But while it's there, it definitely has an effect on traffic, and it's more effective than, for example, people want to speed hump on Oakton. I think this does exactly what speed humps do. It causes you to slow to the speed limit.
Starts flashing before you get there, and I think that's what makes it effective, because you see it.
Yeah.
It makes me behave. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Suzette. I just have a few miscellaneous comments. As in the past, I would certainly support the reduced speed limit to 25 miles an hour throughout the city. I think it's a good idea. I think it addresses a number of problems. I don't think the signage, basically, we could have 25-mile-per-hour limits posted at each entry to the city, and that's it. But I think it addresses areas, especially where you have 25-mile-an-hour postings, close to 30-mile-per-hour postings, where you have people cutting back and forth trying to get to the higher speed limit route. So I think it will help, residential neighborhoods in the long run. So I'd really like to take a look at that. Alderman Nguyen, they have those in Switzerland too, and I'll tell you, for even mild-mannered Switzerland, people get incredibly angry at those cameras, and in some cases, I've even seen them shot out. So I think we want to, I know, it's just, you think Switzerland, my gosh. But, yeah, I've seen them. But I'd like to know if we're going to pursue that, a little bit of experience from some communities who have used them in terms of maintenance costs.
Thank you very much.
So, the committee would hold a public meeting or a public information meeting mid to late July and kind of provide the preliminary information, get feedback from the public at that point, and present a report back to council at a special meeting, as I indicated, on August 6th. And then we would develop a implementation plan and try to complete as many of those feasible recommendations that we could prior to the start of school for 2012. So it's a bit of an aggressive timeline, but we feel that it's important to improve the safety for the kids.
Thank you. Alderman Tandem?
I'm not sure if you're finished with your presentation. Are you planning to talk about the safe routes to school, the maps that were included in our packet?
I was not. Okay. I included those for your information, and then if there are additional areas where you would like us to study, either you can email me or tell me now, and we will add whatever. If there's an intersection, even if it's not related to the safe route to school, we'll incorporate. We're going to look at all those that are designated, and then whatever else you would like us to take a look at.
Okay. For instance, in my ward, the entire area west of Grosse Pointe, west of Crawford, is not even on the map. We're talking about two large neighborhoods. I guess my question is, are they not considered walking distance, or maybe it was just omitted from the map?
They're bust. Yeah, that's what I do think they're bust.
Okay. But I do have some other questions to ask you about, and I can email those to you. But I would like to be part of this process a little more in terms of the safe routes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, thanks. I forgot one thing I wanted to ask you, Suzette. Could you just talk really briefly about the role that timing of signals plays in safety?
I'm going to turn that over to Mr. DeHall to speak to that.
And have we paid really close attention to that?
Yes. At intersections, what we do is, especially for pedestrian safety, we have started adding the countdown signals, so that gives a better indication to the pedestrian how many seconds they have to cross the street, or before they start crossing the street. We also, depending on the location, use a walking speed. And normally it's 3.5. We use 3.5 feet per second, but the federal standards might use 4 feet per second, so we're slightly lower the walking speed rate. And then we measure the crossing distance, the street, so we make sure that we have enough walk time once the pedestrian, for the don't walk signal, once the pedestrian starts crossing, they have enough time to make it across.
And these are times that you use for people with baby buggies or people walking dogs,
Yes.
or small children,
Yes.
pushing a bicycle.
There are locations we've used, like for if they're small children, we might use 3 feet per second, or elderly, but our standard time is 3.5 feet per second, to cross.
Okay. And then in terms of just timing of signals along a long stretch of road, like Ridge or Asbury. Does that play a role in
Yes,
increasing
what we've done
safety?
is for Ridge, primarily for Ridge, since we have so many signals which are coordinated, Ridge is part of a 21 signal coordination system. They talk to each other, the signals in the downtown and Church and Davis, and also a couple of signals on Asbury. But Ridge itself, the timing is allows, we try to control the speed. It's about 27 miles per hour. So if a car starts at 1 at 27 miles per hour, the first few cars in the platoon of cars should be able to make it at least till Main Street. And then when it sort of breaks down because of the different type of phasing we've had to do at Main Street and on Oakton Street.
So could you keep cars moving at like 24 miles an hour so they hit every green light up to that point as well?
Yes, yes. I mean, if somebody goes at 5 miles per hour, say on the Ridge, they'll hit a red light.
Because my experience is that drivers are really smart about that. They find the easiest routes, they find the green lights.
All right. Director Robinson, does that complete your report? Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have one final presentation this evening before the item that was continued from the last meeting, and that's Catherine Hurley, our Director of Sustainability, is here with an update on your council goal regarding the Climate Action Plan. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, City Manager Bobkowitz, and City Clerk Green. Catherine Hurley, a Sustainable Programs Coordinator. However, I've heard a few people say Director tonight, which I think is pretty funny. I'm okay.
Including the City Manager, pretty good, huh?
I'm okay being Coordinator because I think that really describes the job that I have, coordinating with all the different departments and with members of the community. So as was stated, I'm here to provide an update on the Climate Action Plan, and this is going to focus on the city and the community's activities in the calendar year 2011. So we're obviously already in June, but we had a lot of activities going on with electricity aggregation earlier this year. So when we come back next year, we'll include everything that's happened to date. So as you hopefully recall, the Evanston Climate Action Plan goal is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 13% by the end of 2012, and to date, more than 50% of those 220 strategies have been implemented. I'd also really like to acknowledge and thank all of the members of our staff and of the whole community that have really helped together as a team to implement this plan. 220 different strategies is quite a lot of items, even for a community of our size, and so it's been a really great team effort for everyone working together. So the first thing that I'd really like to highlight is all of the different awards and recognitions that the city received in 2011. Since adoption of the plan, the city staff and community partners have been working hard to implement the plan, and progress that's happened in the last 3 years have especially been rewarded in 2011 with several prestigious awards. I've listed them all on this slide. Among these awards, the U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Award was particularly prestigious. Evanston was selected out of a pool of 130 applicants from across the country. And as you may remember, the award sponsor, Walmart, provided a $15,000 cash check that went to Citizens for Greener Evanston to help continued support of the implementation of the plan. So that was pretty prestigious. And also worth highlighting that Evanston is among the top 10 Illinois communities that have the longest consecutive recognition from the Arbor Day Foundation for our protection of trees. So getting right to the numbers, everyone wants to know, how are we doing? Implementation of the Climate Action Plan can be summarized both in our measurable results from emissions of a reduction of our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as some of the specific programs and projects. I'm going to talk about both of those. For the city's operations, emissions have been steadily decreasing since 2005, as you can see on this slide, and we've reduced emissions by 24% since 2005, with 11% reductions in the last 3 years alone. So significant progress has been made there. Another strategy in the Climate Action Plan was to reduce our emissions by generating renewable energy on site here in Evanston. The city evaluated renewable energy technologies and options for city buildings and decided to first do a pilot project for a solar photovoltaic project at the water plant. Now, the water plant is ideal because it operates 24 hours a day, 365, and it has over 80,000 square feet of roof to choose from. So the initial 25 kilowatt project was put in place, and the project to date is operating ahead of how it was designed. And in 2011, it generated 30,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, which is the equivalent to reducing about 4 cars off the road or 50 barrels of oil. So all day long when the sun is shining, energy is being generated at the water plant, and the water plant directly is using it right away, and that is then energy that we don't have to purchase from electric utility. So that was related to the city's operational emissions. The city's operational emissions are actually only 2% of the whole community-wide emissions, so it's really great that Evanston, as a city, as a employer, is being a leader, but we also have to look at what's going on in the wider community. So across the community, we can divide our emissions into residential and commercial energy, and then transportation. Now, energy usage, as you might expect across the community, is highly dependent on weather. Obviously, if we have really hot or really cool periods of time, then people are running their air conditioning or they're heating more. But still, we can see a decreasing trend, and since 2009, we have seen about a 4% reduction in our emissions. And now that we've been implementing the plan for so many years, we actually can look back and see data since 2005. So the idea is, from year to year, we may have little fluctuations up or down based on weather, but we want overall to have a whole trend of decreasing emissions. And commercial energy usage, as you can see, the red bar in the middle, is the largest source of community emissions, representing 54%. So that's a significant opportunity I'm going to talk about later. Another important opportunity for us to look at how we're doing in terms of sustainability for our community is related to waste reduction and recycling. So this slide shows the recycling volume since 2003. Recycling volumes have been increasing steadily over time, with about 19% since 2005 and 6% in the 2010 to 2011 timeframe. So, and these numbers represent recycling across the whole community, not just residential properties. And over time, as we have our solid waste franchise, we'll be able to have even more specific reporting on some of the different segments that are being included in the franchise. In addition to looking at recycling, we also want to look at how we're doing with waste. And this slide is intended to show some information on the refuse for residential waste collection. So for residential properties, we can see about a 3% reduction in the collection of waste volume. So that's a good start. We obviously would like to do more, and we'll continue to work to not only promote recycling, but make sure that we're also promoting the waste reduction strategies before we even get to the point of having to choose recycling. So now that we've talked a little bit about all the numbers, what does this all say for us? So the city's operations have seen a measurable reduction in both our electricity and natural gas emissions, and I have the percentages shown on the slide. As I also said, the solar PV project is generating about 30,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. And you also may recall that Evanston City Council authorized, as part of the purchase of electricity for the city's largest 20 buildings, for 25% of that energy to be offset with renewable energy certificates. So energy for our largest buildings, 25% of that is being offset with greener energy. So in total, the operational emissions have been reduced by 5,898 metric tons, or equivalent to just around 1,000 passenger vehicles. So now looking at the community impact, as I said, the city's operational emissions are only 2%, so the community is much larger. Again, we've also seen reductions in both electricity and natural gas emissions. And similarly to the city, Northwestern University has also purchased renewable energy certificates to help offset some of their energy usage as well. Two other factors that I wanted to incorporate this year is to look at how we're doing with public transit ridership, because as we've been talking, one of the great ways to help promote alternate forms of transportation that have lower emissions is through public transportation. So this was based on information that was available through CTA and PACE in a, online and in a publicly accessible format. But both the CTA ridership on the Purple Line and PACE ridership for the main buses in Evanston have both seen an increase. I was not able to get data for the Metra, as they have a little bit of different system of quantifying their ridership, but that's something we can work on for next year. So total emissions at the community-wide level are right around 36,000 metric tons, or the equivalent to about 7,000 passenger vehicles. So when you add those two together, total emission reductions below our baseline, about 42,000 metric tons, or the equivalent of 8,245 passenger vehicles. And if you'll remember from some of the information from last year, we were less than 1,000 passenger vehicles for the city and in the 7,000 range for the community. So I compared this back to 2005 because that's our baseline and the standard procedure, but every year we continue to make decreases in our emissions. So now I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the specific projects that have helped to get to these reduction in emissions. Building energy usage is something that's obviously really important for the Evanston operations to decrease, because that's our biggest emissions category. In the last year, the city has completed 4 lighting and energy efficiency projects, including those at the water treatment plant, Church Street Parking Garage, Ecology Center, and Noise Cultural Arts Center. And as we heard a couple weeks ago in presentation from Fleet, the Fleet department has been working very rigorously to help increase the energy efficiency and mileage per vehicles and help to reduce older vehicles as they get retired and replace them with the most efficient vehicles possible. Also important to note that the city has replaced our regular diesel with biodiesel B20, and this diesel fuel B20 has much lower emissions than regular biodiesel, so that's also a good thing. So all of these projects have primarily been completed with grant money from the Department of Energy and the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And so money spent in the last 2.5 years is about $850,000 from grant funding. So that's fantastic. In the graph in the beginning with the reductions, we can see those dollars at work. Also, it shouldn't go without saying that members of the community and all the hard work that staff has done to make every project and every dollar we spend be as efficient as possible. So looking out into the community, area of transportation is one where there's a significant opportunity for us to reduce emissions. And one of the key strategies is by focusing on education, outreach, and advocacy for lower emitting forms of transportation, which can include walking, biking, rollerblading, carpooling, and obviously the use of public transportation. So a few highlights in this section. With using a grant as well, the city updated the bicycle route and parking map, as we can see on the left, and had 5,000 copies produced from the grant, which the city's been handing out at community centers, here at the Civic Center, at Car Free Day, and getting out to the community. And we had summer volunteers, some of the summer youth employment and some other interns go out and do an inventory of bike racks to help encourage people to park at the bike racks. So on this map, the red dots are related to where bike racks are located, and then the size of it's actually a square. The size of the square indicates how many bikes can fit there. So the bigger the square, the more racks. And the enlargement on the lower left is of the downtown area to help direct people to those bike racks. The city continues to support and increase car sharing, and our pool of IGO and car share cars has increased. And the cities continue to partner with other organizations on events such as Bike the Ridge, Bike to Work Week, and Car Free Day to help give people that extra motivation to get out and choose something else besides cars in their transportation. And in all of these cases, these programs were all delivered either through grant resources or through outreach and education, staff time and community volunteer time, but no other significant resources other than the public works projects that Suzette's been talking about that are really great. Energy efficiency is promoted across the community by building partnerships and, again, working on low-cost or no-cost programs. The city's Green Building Ordinance is a great example of a very low-cost program that helps promote the use of energy efficiency technologies in buildings. So this slide on the left shows what I would call our LEED scorecard for U.S. green buildings. So with residential and commercial energy usage representing 81% of our whole community emissions, helping to promote buildings to be as efficient as possible when they either get built or renovated is a tremendous opportunity for the city, and we should continue to see more buildings get added to our LEED scorecard. Another great example of successful partnerships with energy efficiency is the Big 7 Savers Challenge. The Big 7 Savers Challenge was launched last spring by our Green Ribbon Committee, which is made up of the city's 7 largest employers. All year, employees of each of these Big 7, which are Evanston Hospital, St. Francis Hospital, Rotary, Evanston Skokie School District 65, Evanston Township High School, Northwestern University, and the City of Evanston, competed to see which employees could get the most people signed up for this online energy efficiency tool and which team could save the most energy over the period of 1 year, with the grand prize of 2 teams being selected to randomly pick one person from their team to win a year of free electricity. And this actually really motivated people to sign up for the tool at the chance that maybe 1 out of 100 or 500 people on their team would be selected. So we actually did end the contest after the new year, but I wanted to make sure to put the results. As we can see on the slide, people that participated saved almost $40,000 collectively and almost 300,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. The 2 winning teams were Evanston Hospital for the biggest team and the high school for the most energy savings per team member. And Amber Knopp of the North Shore team and Mary Spoden of the Evanston High School team each were awarded a check which totaled their electricity usage from the previous year. And this is a picture of Amber from the hospital with Mayor Tisdall receiving the check for her bill from the previous year. So it was a great success, and the Citizens Utility Board, who sponsored this, was very happy to work with us on it. Another great hallmark of the implementation of the Climate Action Plan and sustainability in Evanston has been the city's Think Green, greater recycling in every Evanston neighborhood, which is a hallmark of the Public Works Department and invention of Director Robinson's. And this is the logo on the top of the slide is what's going on all the branding. So there have been several, I think, key projects in this category that have really made a significant impact on our numbers. First and foremost, the 95-gallon recycling containers that really helped all the community to provide bigger capacity because people, quite frankly, wanted to recycle more they can fit in the little bin. So that's been a huge success. And then this year, using, again, federal grant resources, Public Works was able to complement those bins at home by having recycling on the go. And in the upper left-hand corner, we have the picture of the business district and the park recycling container. So now everywhere you go around the community, we see a garbage can, we see the recycling container out in public, so people can make it even easier to recycle. The recycling pamphlet on the far right and the composting guide in the middle, both were created this year in 2011 with staff, and as well numerous copies printed with grant money again, so great opportunity to get educational materials paid for by grants. And in the lower left-hand picture, that's a picture of electronics. Hopefully, these were going to the recycling program. But for the several continuous years, the city has been promoting paper shredding as well as electronics recycling. In the last 2 years, Public Works has enhanced this program to also be a wider Public Works fair. So the event is going to be this year on July 14th, and we're partnering with Evanston High School, so it's going to be at the high school to have lots of room for not only electronics recycling, paper shredding. We're going to be doing plastic bag recycling and bottle caps and ink cartridges and all sorts of different things that people can do one-stop recycling, so to speak. The last category of the Climate Action Plan is a little bit of a catch-all. It's called Land, Water, and Food. So there are a few highlights that I put up that the city had from 2011. You may recall the new indoor farmer and artisan food market that was started in the Ecology Center. So at the end of the season, when people were getting cold and the outdoor farmers market closed, and people could then go inside, and that was a big success. With the support of the Water Department, the Tap Water campaign to promote tap water in Evanston has continued, and they estimate that over 1,000 water bottles, the reusable nice water bottles, were handed out at events including Bike the Ridge, the Green Living Festival, Paint Evanston Purple, tours of the water treatment plant, and the Evanston Grand Prix. So again, getting people reusable water bottles to help promote our own tap water as well as help reduce waste by single-use bottles. And you'll be hearing, hopefully in a couple weeks, about the results of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning Water Efficiency Plan grant that the city received in 2010, and staff has been working with their staff to put together a plan with more details about how we can promote drinking water in Evanston and water efficiency. For the last part of the presentation, wanted to provide some information on the strategy for what types of activities are planned for 2012. As I mentioned in the beginning, 220 different strategies. This is an awful lot of things that one could focus on. So after working with the city manager and members of the community and really evaluating what that breakdown is of how we generate emissions, trying to come up with 2 specific priority areas and then 2 more sustaining actions. And so I'm definitely looking for feedback and hopefully support on these 4 areas. So since 81% of our emissions come from energy usage, it's logical that the most important thing that I should be helping the city staff and the community is to reduce energy usage. And I think that there are so many great existing programs out there, existing incentives and money to do projects. The best thing we can do is help leverage those existing programs and resources and have Evanstonians be able to take advantage of those monies. So the first thing is to continue to partner with CUB Citizens Utility Board on their CUB Energy Saver online tool. And I'd like to set a goal of 1,000 new households to participate, working with CUB and getting out in the community. We still have thousands of CFL light bulbs that we can hand out. And it's amazing, Citizens Green Evanston just handed out about 1,000 at the Custer Fair over the weekend. And they said they were surprised how many people still had the ability to put some more in their house. And not everyone has completely maxed out. So definitely opportunity there. And then the second strategy is to really work, like I said, with the utilities and the other state and federal agencies that have energy efficiency programs that provide financial incentive, whether that be a rebate for installing a specific energy efficiency device or a newer Energy Star appliance, or more customized programs that provide energy audits and then assistance to help do weatherization and retrofit. So I'd like to focus on trying to get about 500 customers to help redeem a wide variety of incentives that is basically ratepayer money that people are paying and are entitled to be taking advantage of those incentives. And then the second strategy is to really help continue to reinforce all the infrastructure we've put in for waste reduction and recycling and help support an education and outreach effort to help people continue to do the right thing. Public Works has set a 10,000-ton recycling goal, and so I think it's important to help support that wider goal. We're about 9,200 tons right now, which is great, and it would be really great to reach the 10,000-ton goal. And then also, in addition to recycling, help support further efforts to reduce material out of the landfill by focusing on composting and adding to the 500 households we have participating in the composting program and try to get that to 1,000. And then in addition to those more 2 specific programs, 2 other strategies, continue to build and maximize partnerships. As you probably know, we're blessed with so many different organizations in Evanston that are working on the energy, on the environment, or sustainability, and one of the best things that we can do is all work together so we can leverage our efforts. So the Environment Board, the Utilities Commission, and the Office of Sustainability did hold the very first meet and greet event of all of these groups. There were over 100 different groups that were invited, and so it was very well received, and the goal will be to have twice a year a meeting of that nature and really get the groups to continue to work together and be able to leverage resources and efforts for each other. And then finally, continue to expand our communication on sustainability efforts and those energy and cost savings opportunities. Not only, I put on here a goal to increase our e-newsletter for sustainability from 500 as it is now to 1,000, but I also think expanding the message out to people who don't have the message right now, and I really love the presentation about reaching out to our Latino community and the library to really reach to new communities. We could definitely work on getting some of our materials that aren't already in Spanish and making sure that we're not only preaching the message about sustainability and energy and cost savings to the same people but to new audiences. And so I think if we do these 2 things and the other 2 programs, we will continue to work towards meeting our goals. And then one last note on partnerships. I just want to reiterate again that the implementation of the plan is really a whole community effort from city council and the mayor, to the city staff, and to all of our citizen groups that come to participate in the Green Living Festival or volunteer at the recycling fair. It really takes the whole community, and I really cannot thank them enough for all the effort and volunteer hours that have been put in, because it's been tremendous. So with that, I'll take questions or feedback on the strategy or plan or anything else people want to know.
Alderman Fisk.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. That was a very good report. Can you tell me a little bit about what the problem is with the IGO installation?
Yeah, so the project that we have, our agreement is with IGO, the car sharing company. And the money that they have for the project, some of it comes from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So, for example, the solar canopy, they have money themselves. But the installation of the charging stations is part of a bigger project that the City of Chicago administered, so a large federal grant to help stimulate electric vehicle deployment. So the part of the project with the City of Chicago, they've been having trouble having the company 350 Green that has that contract with them to install the charging stations from completing their work. So we got the initial underground infrastructure in place, and the next then step was to have the 350 Green partner put the charging stations in, and our timing just happened to be that they were running out of money. So right now, IGO is 100% committed to finishing the project, and they have money for the canopy and for the work associated with that piece, and they're working to go back to the funder that's separate from the Chicago project to be able to complete the project. So I just actually spoke with Sharon Feigen last week, and she 100% assured me that they have a plan for moving forward without 350 Green, all lined up, and are just waiting for their funders to basically release the funds. So I'm basically touching base with her on a weekly basis to get updates, but she's assured me that the project will be completed and that they're going to be moving forward without waiting for what might happen with the Chicago project. So, but our contract is with, our whole contract is with IGO. So and they're a very viable company and are part of Center for Neighborhood Technology. So we will definitely get our project completed. But as soon as I have more details, I'll be able to let you guys know.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Hurley. In our efforts to divert as much waste as possible from landfill to recycling or to compost, what I found very effective is labeling. And in a couple places, I've seen a recycling bin right next to a garbage bin, but the garbage is labeled landfill. And it certainly made me think more than once about whether what I was throwing away was appropriate for recycling or landfill. And we label our recycling bins and we label our compost bins, but we don't label our garbage carts to designate that ultimate destination. And maybe it would help our residents understand the destination for the garbage, which is landfill and garbage dumps, and encourage them then to recycle and compost instead.
Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And congratulations. Next on the agenda is report of the Standing Committees, Planning and Development, Alderman Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From Planning and Development, we'd like to, was introduced Ordinance 38-0-12, amending various portions of the city code relating to bed and breakfast establishments. At our meeting, at our last meeting, I believe we had 3 items that we needed to bring back to the committee, if I remember correctly, of the distance, the number of the parking, and also deleting 2 flats. Is that 2 flats? Those were the things that we needed to bring back before the council. And particularly in terms of the distance, I think Alderman Rainey wanted to bring that as a discussion before the whole council. It was already introduced at the last meeting.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Alderman Nguyen.
The agenda we have says that this is for introduction tonight. What is the procedural posture of this at this point?
It was introduced at the last meeting.
That's what I understood.
It was held.
It was held, oh, okay.
So tonight's is for action?
No, it will be introduction again. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
There was no action, Madam Mayor, Alderman Nguyen, there was no action taken at your last meeting. Under the council's rules, an item is held until the next regular meeting. This is now considered a regular meeting, so it would be the previous requested action, which is introduction.
Thank you.
Alderman Rainey?
Madam Mayor, I asked that this be brought before the council, and this is a perfect way to do it because it is not a regular, it's not a formal, regular introductory or action meeting of the City Council. It's an in-between meeting. I moved at a previous P&D meeting that the distance be reduced from 1,000 feet to 500 feet. At the next P&D meeting, it was reduced to, it was increased to 750 feet, the distance between bed and breakfasts. I felt that that this issue had to be before the whole council, and I don't care if we really discuss it tonight or when it's time for action, but I think that the 750 feet is extraordinary, and would like to discuss the map that we have with the circles. Not quite understanding if the 500 feet or 10 feet, whatever it is a linear number of feet, or are we going to do these circular? Is my understanding it would be linear. So the circle is really not that descriptive, other than showing you how far in this direction or how far in that direction. Because there are addresses in the circle that are like 10 feet from an address outside the circle. Right. So I think that the circle is really what we have to do more is a starburst or whatever, but the circle does not describe it. So if you don't want to discuss amending the amendment here, I'll be glad to wait another week. But it's going to be discussed.
That's fine.
I'm willing to do whatever the council wishes. Alderman Burris?
And as I emailed to both you, Mayor Tisdale, and Mr. Bobkowitz, I was requesting that the final action be held until the July 9th meeting, as I will not be able to be at the next council meeting, and I feel that this is an extremely important issue. And I know that Alderman Nguyen, at the last meeting, you had asked something to be held for Alderman Grover to be here, and I'd like that to be extended courtesy. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Alderman Rainey.
Yes. Madam Mayor, could we turn, I'm going to sit down because I keep using the circle. Could we turn to page 62 of the packet?
Yes.
For example, and I'm being serious, I'm not being facetious, but if you look, if this target has any meaning, and I can't see that it does, other than, I don't know, if you look, let's say at 1201 Sheridan Road, there is a bed and breakfast. Let's just say that. Does that mean, whoops, I keep losing this. Does that mean that at 1201 Sheridan Road, there's a bed and breakfast? Does that mean that at 1140 Hamilton Street, there can be a bed and breakfast? Which is like spitting distance from... Are the exclusions only those things shown within the circles?
I think, Mr. Griffin, we need your help.
Because, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The map only represented one example of 235 that's in the center of it. So the question is if you go with the 500 foot, for example, you see that distance there, so if anything within that 500-foot ring proposes a bed and breakfast, it would be too close.
All right.
So we do this when we do advertising, for example, with our GIS staff, so that we make sure we do these notices for everything within 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, whatever the ordinance
So the
requires.
subject property would be the center of the target?
Yes, ma'am.
No matter what, okay. That's just not that.
Alderman Grover.
And if the subject property is the center of the target, what does it take to be included in the target? If you are an address that is partially within the range and partially without, are you excluded? I can't, and by the way, I did count up the number of addresses just in this hypothetical within 750 feet, and there were between 140 and 150 addresses within the 750-foot radius of this hypothetical address. So how does it work if the 750 feet, I guess if it just gets to any address, that it would fall within the exclusion?
Well, on 5785M, it is the operating section of the ordinance. So distance, no bed and breakfast establishment shall be permitted within 750 feet of another bed and breakfast establishment. So very unfortunately, it wouldn't be the structure, it'd be the piece of the property. So if any piece of the property that is where they would propose, we would judge that to be too close.
Then I'd expand my estimate of how many addresses just within this hypothetical.
Yes, ma'am. It's quite a few.
Quite a few more.
Yes, ma'am.
Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Griffin. This is the way that we determine whether someone is a legal objector when they come before the ZBA or the Plan Commission. If any portion of your property is within the notice distance, you are a legal objector. Your house doesn't have to be within the circle. This is also the distance, the way we determine distances between help me out here, residential occupancy, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for home care facilities.
Yes, home care facilities, the same thing. It's if a portion of the property is within the distance requirement, then that property is barred from being a residential, I'm blanking on what it's called.
For a subsequent home care facility to be
Right, yes. So it isn't the structure itself, because the structure can be anywhere on the parcel. So, but this is the standard way that this operates throughout our code. So any property any portion of it that's within the circle becomes a property that is prohibited from that activity. So just as Girls Hope, Boys Hope is in the 1100 block of Hinman, there cannot be another Girls Hope, Boys Hope within 900 feet of any edge of that property.
All right.
And 900 feet is the standard that we use. So 750, I'm just arguing for this. 750 feet is less than the 900-foot distance that we use for other facilities that have some similar impact in the sense that it's not a single-family home. And I'll add one more thing, and I said this at the subcommittee, that at the bed and breakfast, I think we're struggling over how someone can run a bed and breakfast, and I don't see it as the city's job as to allow or come up with the most open possibility for someone who owns a single-family residence to convert it to a bed and breakfast. I mean, you purchased your home in a single-family in an R1 single-family district, you have certain expectations about that. When we permit bed and breakfasts with great frequency, that alters what your expectation is when you purchase a single-family home. So I don't know why we are bending over backwards to permit people to open as many of these as possible in our single-family R1 districts. So 750 feet to me is a reasonable distance. It's less than we require for other special permitted uses that we already recognize in our code are different than having a single-family residential neighborhood. 750 feet, it may look like a long distance, but it's not. 750, a typical block in Evanston is 600 feet. So when you're looking at 750 feet, it may look like a big circle, but you know what? You walk it in no time at all. I really don't think 750 feet is extraordinary.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
Well, if you count 750 feet or 500 feet or 250 feet from certain addresses, you're going to come across gas stations, you're going to come across animal hospitals, you're going to come across daycare centers, schools, all sorts of very intense uses. I think it's interesting and a little prejudicial that this circle is in the location that it's in. And I'm going to take the side of a bed and breakfast operator or a person who desires to and put it in another neighborhood where the homes are much smaller, where they are more close together, and in that 750 or 500 feet, you're going to discriminate and exclude a lot more possibilities. So I think it's interesting that this circle is in this neighborhood. There are other neighborhoods that have R1 districts that could have been used, but instead this neighborhood was used. I don't think this neighborhood is entitled to anything more than any other neighborhood is. And if just go over to Chicago, just put something at Dempster and Dempster and Hinman, and then draw that 750. What have you got there? You've got L-tracks, you've got all sorts of things. Those are R1 homes. And did anybody say, oh, you can't put these things because it's an R1 district? No. I really think this is all about one person, one operator. And I think that's really unfortunate. We're acting as though these bed and breakfasts are going to be brothel-like or party houses, and I just don't know where that comes from. There was a fabulous article in the Sunday Sun-Times or Trib, I can't remember which, about bed and breakfasts that have been put into these mansions in Detroit. And they have done such fabulous things to invigorate the community and in no way take away from it. And so it just seems a little uppity to me to hear how devastating the presence of a bed and breakfast, 5-bedroom bed and breakfast is going to be on Hamlin and whatever, because that's not going to happen. Bed and breakfasts attract a certain kind of person, and they're not revelers. So I think we ought to take a step back and think about what we're saying here. And also, I don't have any problem with the owner of the property not running them, as long as a person who is a highly skilled, qualified hotel operator or runs the bed and breakfast. I could have a bed and breakfast in my house. I have 4 bedrooms. I could use 3 for bed and breakfast. I know anything about running a bed and breakfast, but I would be a legal operator because I'm the homeowner. So I think we really have to think about what we're doing and not get all bent out of joint about who's operating these. I mean, we have one of the richest people in the world wanting to run a bed and breakfast or to take homes that are deteriorating to have bed and breakfasts. And I would think we would be grateful for that. Instead, we're making it impossible not only for that person to do it, but for anybody else who wants to do it. Let's say somebody's really struggling to keep their home. It's a beautiful home. They've done everything in the world for 20 years, and they're thinking, geez, maybe I could do a bed and breakfast and help with the expenses. And we say, oh no, because you're 450 feet from the last one. Well, shame on us. Shame on us. That is elitist, and it's just plain wrong.
Thank you. Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm still trying to kind of picture what 750 feet is. As we talked, Alderman Nguyen, today, I was more comfortable with 500, less comfortable with 750. One of my other questions has to do with the parking requirement, and I wasn't around when the amendment was added, removing curb parking, I believe, is an option or an exception to the requirements. I don't want to divert the conversation from the distance requirement if we haven't wrapped up there yet, but at some point I'd like to, maybe we can have a discussion offline, Mr. Griffin,
Sure.
about the parking requirement and how that works out in this ordinance.
Well, I think
It's
we ought
only
to
a-
have it here.
You want to have it here?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
It's only that we're, for the first time, proposing a parking requirement, a 1-to-1 per guest bedroom, and the previous ordinance, or the current ordinance, had public parking count towards that. So this provision would disallow that for counting for the required parking spaces. So they have to provide off-street or through a lease of adjacent property or a nearby parking garage or whatever. So the one change it takes is the on-street parking space can't count. So when a special use permit application is submitted, they would have to identify where their off-street parking spaces are, and they can't count those spaces on the street as a required parking spot. That's the one simple change.
So at no point during it's a special use permit process would then they ever be able to consider off-street or on-street parking as counting towards it?
Technically you could as part of a variation as part of the special use permit. So if they just can only, it's a 5-bedroom house and they can only get 4 spaces off-site, then they would come before you and try to, through a variance or make some argument why those on-street parking spaces could go forward, but it would not meet the development standard that we're setting out in this ordinance update.
Does that presuppose then that they would need to do a parking study to establish that street parking exists in order to apply for the variance of the parking requirement as part of the special use application?
I think we would suggest that they do that to kind of prove themselves, that's available. But couple of the people that were working on this, we just didn't think it was a good idea, including myself, to require or to allow the on-street parking that's in front of their house to be counted, because that's open for all. That doesn't mean they can't use it. When the time comes, it just can't be used as part of the minimum parking requirements for the establishment.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Tandem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sort of go back to Alderman Rainey's point. With whether you counting at 500 or 1,000, 500 or 75 or 750. The interesting thing is where this house is situated is that potentially there could be on this very long block to the east of this home, another bed and breakfast in that block, just because of the way the block runs in a particularly long way. However, going to the west, there's a street, half a block, an alley, half a block, another street, Judson, a half a block, another alley, and another street. That would be the first opportunity you'd have to actually have a bed and breakfast in the in the 750-foot range. So it seems to me that if we're trying to avoid too much of a clustering of bed and breakfasts, the density of the homes kind of do the separating for us. So it doesn't seem like you would really want one in the same, if you're trying to keep the distance, having one in the same block sort of defeats the purpose. I just don't think that this radius, this perfect circle radius, I understand we used it for notifying people for zoning and other meetings, but it seems to have a real downfall in this map in the sense that our neighborhoods are so differently populated, our lots are so differently sized, and in using this example, it's very clear that this is one of those situations where it includes a very dense neighborhood and a very sparsely populated or bigger lot area. So I'm not sure that the ring technique is necessarily the best option. It seems to me that it would exclude some people that probably should be able to have a bed and breakfast, and maybe include others that we don't really intend to have. So that's, I don't know of a better way, to be honest, but I think it does. It doesn't really deal with the irregularities in sizes of our lots.
Mayor, do you have me?
Thank you, Alderman Tandem. Alderman Burris.
Thank you. I have several questions. I wanted to actually respond to something Alderman Nguyen said tonight, and then actually something Alderman Nguyen had mentioned several months ago. So tonight you had mentioned, wanted to compare group homes to B&Bs, and I don't think that's an accurate depiction, particularly since group homes, people are living there 24/7. It is their home, and so there's a much larger impact on the neighborhood. Bed and breakfast, people aren't there. They're not at full capacity all the time. So it's not that huge impact on the home. Or the neighborhood. The capacity, the occupancy rate for a B&B, I can't even imagine, is more than 50% of the year from things that have been talked about. So I just don't see how that could possibly be the same thing. Then a second point that you've made several months ago is, and I'm going to paraphrase, but I think you said, for years you had an illegal B&B operating across the street from you, and it didn't bother your neighborhood. And I think that's really a poignant thing that you said, because I know how diligent you particularly are for your community and your neighborhood, and if things are not going well, there's residents are upset, you are on top of it, and you're calling Mr. Bobkowitz and the mayor and bringing it here to us. So I know if that B&B would have been a problem, or others that were illegal and not registered would have been a problem, I know that you would have said something. So illegal B&Bs have been going on, and really people haven't been bringing it up as an issue because it hasn't deteriorated to the neighborhood. So I appreciate your honesty about that several months ago. And we haven't talked about, we keep talking about that these B&Bs are going to add to deterioration of a neighborhood. And maybe I missed it in our packet somewhere along the line, but I haven't seen any research that illustrates that anywhere. That having B&Bs suddenly brings down property value, or brings in an unwanted element, or increases crime in a neighborhood. And Mr. Griffin, it would be great to have that kind of information if it exists. And I don't know if your staff had the time to look at that, or if anybody else on council knows of that information or can look it up now, of identifying that. I just don't understand. And then my last point, going to something that Alderman Rainey said, is why do we need a distance requirement if we have all these other criteria for a B&B to operate? We are making it extremely strict for them to operate. So why would it matter if there's a distance requirement? And what about the illegal ones? So almost as you're making people drive underground, as also Alderman Rainey's point of, you have a B&B that has been established legally, and this 750 radius, you have a homeowner that's been here for years and is starting to struggle and wants to start taking in people as a B&B. And we're like, nope, someone got to it before you. You can't do this now. That seems very limiting and not really fair to the overall, all of our residents. So again, I'm not sure why we have this distance requirement. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Sorry, I said one more thing, but actually the parking requirement, also I don't understand that. Many homes in Evanston do not have their own parking space. They park in front of their home, which some think that's their identified parking space, but many of us don't have garages or driveways. So that would mean that if you don't have a garage or a driveway, you can't be a B&B at all. And I'm sure that the illegal B&B that's across the street from your house, I'm sure they didn't have parking spots for all of their rooms or all of their bedrooms. And I'm pretty positive many of the illegal ones didn't either. So I just don't understand why where there's been a problem with them. Has it ever come to council previously that there was rogue B&B owners and we had problems and there were wild parties at B&Bs, or there were, police reports at B&Bs? I just haven't seen that. I would like to see that information as well. What are the police reports on going to B&Bs versus going to group homes, let's say? What is the taxing on our services? So I think there's a lot of information that we're saying doom and gloom if we have too many B&Bs, and I just haven't seen the evidence for that. And Mr. Griffin, and I don't know, you didn't give you a chance to answer, but was your staff able to look at that information about how B&Bs deteriorate a neighborhood or increase crime or any of that information?
There wasn't any of that.
Did you look, or was it just not there?
No, what we did is we looked at and surveyed a number of communities. That was in one of the packets of the basic regulations that a number of communities have. And no, we did not come across anything about those negative aspects. No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Nguyen?
Well, yes, I'd like to address a couple of things. Yes, I had the 2 illegal B&Bs in my ward. That is correct. I didn't blow the whistle on either of them. They had been operating before I became a council member. One of them was my neighbor directly across the street who I had been friends with for 10 years. When she ran into further financial hardship, she sold her home to a group that created a residential group home. So shall we decide that because someone can't stay in their home, that we should eliminate the distance requirements between residential group homes because we want to keep a good neighbor in the neighborhood? I mean, that's the same argument we're making. Someone we like can't make it anymore in their home. Gee, they'd like to open up another residential group home on my block. But they can't. Maybe we should eliminate the residential group home distance then, so my neighbor down the block can also open another residential group home. We have distance requirements because of, in single-family neighborhoods, because we recognize that people purchase a single-family home expecting the neighborhood to stay a single-family neighborhood. But we don't completely bar them because we recognize that some of these places can be used, but we recognize that it's a commercial operation. And actually, both of those B&Bs operated at tremendous capacity. My sister-in-law owns the second one. For months after she purchased her home, people walked in her front door and announced that they were there for another month stay. Months. If we're going to ask, I don't expect them to deteriorate homes. I'm just saying, if you bought your home as a single-family home and you had 2 single-family neighbors surrounding you, and then one of them began to run a commercial operation, I think you might think twice about whether you would buy your home again. So if I'm not saying that they increase crime, I just don't know that everybody wants to buy a house next to a commercial operation, which is what a B&B really is. And right now, the house right next to the residential group home on my block is up for sale. And the realtor has called me a number of times to ask me what the effect is of the residential group home on our block. It's negligible, but every potential homeowner who has found out that they're buying a house next to a residential group home has asked that realtor to ask other people on the block about what the impact is. If we're going to ask for more of this information, I'd like to have a couple of realtors come in and say what the effect is of a single-family home next to a commercial operation like a B&B. Do they think that it would be priced the same way? Do they think that it might have a chilling effect on a purchaser? I don't see this as deteriorating the neighborhood. I think 750 feet is an appropriate distance. It's less than what we have for residential group home. The issue to me here is we're permitting someone to run a commercial operation in a single-family district. And if the the circles that are here cover the gas station and the railroad tracks, that's just our zoning. So, yeah, people purchased their homes not far from Warren Shell, but they didn't want to have 5 B&Bs in their neighborhood. So, I don't think that this is an extraordinary thing to ask, that we have the 750 feet. If there isn't the support on the council, there isn't the support. That's fine. But I'm not saying that these attract crime or that they deteriorate the neighborhood. It's a commercial operation. That's what it is. I would not buy my house. I mean, all a person has to do when they're buying a house is they look at the house, they get a sense of what the street looks like. They don't know whether they're terrific neighbors on that block. They don't know that B&B is always going to be great. If they have a choice between that house next to the B&B and another similar house, because most people do look at a number of houses. I looked at 65 in Evanston. I'm going to choose the one that's not next to the commercial operation. Not because I'm worried it's going to have loud parties. Maybe I am, but maybe I'm worried about what my resale value is going to be. How easy is it going to be for me? Because I'll tell you right now, the home right next door to the group home that's on my block, and that group home has no impact, is causing realtors to call me to ask me what the impact is. It's not the same.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, I agree with what Alderman Nguyen has said. As we've talked this through over the past few months, there are a couple of exceptions I want to take. This isn't about one operator. The operator that was approved at 300 Church is going to run a fabulous operation. But make no mistake about it, it's a commercial operation. That house is going to run as a B&B 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day, with special events. I sold real estate for a long time, and I'll tell you, it would be, given choices of houses, if you're a family with young kids and you're looking at a neighborhood, you're going to be looking at, well, where are the rest of the kids in the neighborhood? You know, who's my kid going to walk to school with? What's going to be the dynamic between neighbors for block parties and things like that? It's not going to be, where's the closest commercial operation to the house that I'm considering? I almost think that a group home is preferable. You'll have folks living there, and that's their residence. They're not going to be renting out their group home for special events. They're not going to be using the property for special events. It's going to have, in my mind, a less negative impact upon the neighborhood. And I do think it has a direct impact on property values, but it has more of a direct impact on the feeling of a residential neighborhood as neighbors living together. We've just spent a good amount of time talking about home occupations, and this is a perfect example of a home occupation. I mean, this is a dramatic impact. As far as struggling homeowners, that's the same argument or discussion that was used when the zoning ordinance was passed in 1993. That's why we have even consideration of Bs and Bs in the zoning ordinance, because as it was testified by various members of the community, it was viewed as a way for homeowners with rising taxes to address some of the problems, or maybe alleviate the high tax bills. Here's what we found. We found that no one operated a legal B&B. It just doesn't make financial sense. When you operate something like this, you have to do advertising, you have to do upkeep, you have to make breakfast, you've got to clean your house, you've got to do a ton of things that most people don't want to extend themselves to do in order to rent out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 bedrooms, or 5. So that's why there were no legal ones. As far as illegal ones, if you're operating an illegal use of any kind, I would suggest you're going to be very quiet about it. You're not going to have weddings in your backyard. You're not going to have parties for 100. You're going to try to keep your footprint in the neighborhood as light as possible so as not to create a problem between you and your neighbors. And that's my guess is what happened in Alderman Wynn's neighborhood. I know that's the case with a B&B that was operating illegally on Asbury for many years. When people came, they were told to be quiet. They were told to pull their car in the back of the property. They were told not to talk to the neighbors. And pretty much none of the neighbors knew what was operating in that specific home. I think that there was a very creative way to address the parking issue with the 300 Church property, and that involved not only the use of the parking garage, but also the use of adjacent property where there was some parking available. So I think that was a very creative use of that. It is basically to keep the cars off the street so that people who live in the neighborhood can also use the street to park on. This particular area is a restricted zone. Some other areas aren't. But parking is obviously something that we're all concerned about. The distance requirement in the end is barely, not even a block and a half. It's a block and a quarter. As Alderman Tendem said, in this particular map, you'd have 2 Bs and Bs on the same block. That's not a good idea. It's not a good idea for the B&B operators. It's not a good idea to concentrate Bs and Bs in a particular neighborhood. I've read on your board, Alderman Rainey, that someone was concerned about something like a B&B operating in your ward.
Nothing like a B&B, trust me.
Okay, well, I read the back and forth on it, and it sounded like people were concerned about it. But and I've heard from people who live in other wards who have said that they are concerned about a proliferation maybe occurring in their wards. And I would just like those of you in other wards to think about this. Because this is the one concrete example that we have. We're trying to deal with almost 20 years now of a use that's been in our zoning ordinance but we haven't had a legal applicant until now. We passed that legal applicant. We're all thrilled about the legal applicant. But when is enough enough? when is too much, too much? And I think it's reasonable to say that within 750 feet, there shouldn't be a second B&B. There's going to be plenty of room for additional Bs and Bs throughout the city, throughout the neighborhoods, but they certainly shouldn't be concentrated in one area. So that's what I have to say, but I think 500 feet is much, much, much too small. I've backed off of my 1,000 feet for the sake of compromise. I think the neighborhood would be satisfied with 750, although they would prefer the 900 to 1,000. And I would just ask you really to consider and to reach out to people who live in your wards and ask them how they would like these commercial uses to be placed in close proximity to their residential homes.
Thank you. Alderman Burris. And Alderman Burris, before you speak, I did want you to know that, as I told you before, I do support holding any item when an alderman is gone, but I do want you to know that the applicant did speak to me, and his business folks spoke to me about the length of time this entire process has taken, and so holding it is not something that is desirable in terms of wanting to get a decision out of this council. So,
Madam Mayor, could we ask who the applicant is that you're speaking of?
Colonel Pritzker's business people met with me and discussed the length of time that this process has taken.
But their application has been approved.
Yes, but the length of time that the B&B discussion has taken.
But why is that?
That's
I'm
not
sorry.
affecting them.
Not our problem.
Okay, I'm just letting Alderman Burris know that that was a concern.
Just a couple of follow-up comments. One, it is striking that we're penalizing legal applicants. Honestly, that's what we're doing. If this would have never been an issue had no one become a legal applicant, we would have pretended like nothing had ever happened. And also, Alderman Fisk, it's interesting, you also knew about an illegal B&B. So obviously, they've been happening, and if they would have continued to happen illegally, we would have never gone to zoning and made changes and it become an issue. So I guess that says something about our process. And the B&Bs do have residents. They have a homeowner that is living in the home. So it's not as if this is somebody that turns off the lights, locks the door, and leaves and goes elsewhere. They're part of the fabric of the community. And I just can't imagine that this type of home, because that's what it is, it's a home, is any more impactful than a very large family that has many birthday parties, or they do a lot of fundraisers at their home, or Alderman Tendam, that they have kids coming back and forth. They have 3 teenagers that each have a vehicle that are driving. I think it's hard to say that this is more impactful and that you wouldn't want to live next to it. And it's different than a group home. Again, a group home is an institutional use. This is a home where someone is living and renting out rooms occasionally. It's not a permanent residence for the majority of the people that are coming. So it's a completely different use. So again, I wish that comparison would stop being made, because they're completely different comparisons. And if we didn't consider the illegal B&Bs commercial uses, and they weren't reported by city elected officials when they were illegal, as you described them, commercial uses, why is it now an issue when we're trying to make them legal uses? We had an applicant that came in with a legal use, and now it's become an issue for the legal B&Bs. I think it just doesn't make a lot of sense that they weren't a problem before and now they are a problem. And we still don't have any evidence that B&Bs are a problem in the neighborhoods. we do probably have evidence that group homes have add to the services. And Mr. Griffin, that would be very helpful if we could have information on how group homes differ in impact on neighborhoods versus bed and breakfast.
Alderman Rainey?
Well, I don't think there should be bed and breakfasts next to each other. I absolutely don't. And I do support a distance requirement. I certainly don't support 1,000. I absolutely don't support 750. You know, I'd like to talk about 500. However, the arguments made by both Alderman Fisk and Alderman Nguyen really go to banning bed and breakfasts because the economic impact and the social impact is really in the 4 houses that surround it. You would never buy the house next to a bed and breakfast. So whether it's 500 feet or 1,000 feet or 750 feet, the person who lives 750 feet is not going to be impacted at all by the bed and breakfast, as is the person who lives 500 feet. The only people we're concerned about are the people who live surrounding the bed and breakfast. Realtors are going to be called in. Alderman Nguyen said out of the 65 houses, if there had been a bed and breakfast, she wouldn't have bought the house next to it, across the street, behind it, or near it. So those are the people we're really concerned about. So the distance requirement isn't that effective in dealing with the impact of a single bed and breakfast. So, well, I think there should be a distance requirement. I think it really doesn't address the problem of the poor souls that live around the bed and breakfasts, because nobody's going to buy those houses. So I don't know how you deal with that unless we do the chicken coop theory, and that is you have to get your neighbor's approval to do a bed and breakfast. That would take care of the 4 houses surrounding a bed and breakfast. And I'm not sure how practical that is, because probably a person who is going to do them maybe not be the current owner. I'm not sure. But the 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 750 does not address the impact of a single bed and breakfast.
Thank you. Next is Alderman Fisk, and I'd like to point out that this is not an action item for tonight, so.
But we could amend, we could take certain actions, we just can't vote on it.
Okay.
That's okay. No, I think we said enough.
Alderman Nguyen?
I'll pass.
All right.
Yeah, the rounding, you can try. You can try.
I introduce it, because it needs to be introduced tonight.
Okay.
It's already introduced.
No, well, they said because we
No.
didn't take action, we'd have to I thought it had been introduced too. It's introduced. As far as I recall, it was introduced, and I simply asked that
It was held.
introduction.
It was held. It was held in committee.
Wasn't it introduced and held?
No.
And held at the council level?
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. I thought I was
That's what I
correct.
thought, too.
It was introduced and held at the council level.
That's right.
It can't be held again.
Huh? Yes, it can be held. It can be held
Held
and
again?
tabled and whatever.
Well,
Is that true?
I believe
Is that what I was told?
Madam Mayor, members of the council,
Can't
and
take
Clerk
action
Green
tonight
can help. Our understanding was that it was held, and so it was not introduced. It was held at the council.
Well,
So
you
it was
can't
reported
hold
out by the
something-
committee.
Wait, a point of order, City Manager. You cannot hold something at a council level that hasn't been introduced.
Right.
And that may be practice. I don't know that your rules state that.
Well, it certainly is a rule. It is certainly a rule. The only way you can hold an item is once it's been introduced, then you can hold it. There's nothing to hold if it hasn't been introduced. It can be held at the committee level without introducing.
At the council level.
All right, so we agreed that it was introduced. City Clerk, is that your understanding of this?
It was introduced, it was held, to the next meeting, which means now that because it was introduced at the point of time, you can then amend the motion for amend the held motion that was put in. And so it'll come up for a second. You can debate it, you can amend it, and the majority will have to approve it.
But we can't vote action on the total bill until the next meeting, because we require, one meeting and then 2 weeks later. Yeah.
Was it 2 weeks?
Definitely not.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Wood.
If it's our understanding that it was introduced...
I challenge that.
No. Yeah, Alderman Rainey, that it was introduced at the last meeting and then held, and now we're acting on it again. Can we hold it a second time? I thought an item could not be held more than twice.
But it's not this isn't a regular meeting. I mean, this is a special meeting.
But it is a regular meeting of the City Council.
Well, it's not.
According to the Evanston City Code, this is a regular meeting.
It is my understanding that...
Madam Mayor, I move that this...
It's the first time we've ever had a regular meeting when we have to...
Madam Mayor?
Alderman Wood.
Do I still have the floor?
Yes, you do.
I'm not certain what I move that we table the item to a date certain, and that date be, when is the date you're back, Alderman?
July 9th.
9th.
July 9th.
I second that.
Third.
It's been moved, seconded, and thirded to hold this until July 9th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is held until July 9th. Thank you. Next item is...
And then it'll be up for action.
That's correct.
Yes, it will. The next item between us and adjournment is appointments.
Move to approve the appointments as designated in the...
We're withdrawing the Board of Ethics is being held, but all the others.
With the exception of the Board of Ethics, I move that we approve the appointments as set forth in the agenda.
Been moved and seconded to approve the appointments. I'm sorry, Alderman Tandem. Oh, okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the appointments as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded.
I do have one correction on the calendar.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Alderman Tandem
On the
has...
calendar for Thursday, June 21st, Housing Commission, it says 6 p.m. It is at 7 p.m.
Thank you. We didn't have call of the wards, which isn't on the agenda, but do you want to do that?
No.
All right. That was a clear answer. Thank you all.
The appointments were approved with amendment. The appointments were approved with amendment.
Right, yeah.